Hello and welcome to the One About Podcast, a show where 2/3 of us love Spook each week. This week we're continuing the Spook train with our first double feature. This is the one about The Shining and Dr. Sleep. I'm your host Dean, I also go by EndlessCola in places around the internet, and I am joined this week, as always, by Spook Room Jordan, and the only man I know who would fly from Miami to Colorado and drive up a mountain in a blizzard to save us all, John. What's going on, guys?
Oh my god. I literally stopped myself from saying fucking Christ when you said spook.
Spook.
I told you, we
Son of a
established it
bitch.
last time. It's
This
here
is
to
not
stay.
going away, man.
Damn it.
We got a whole month
Sorry.
of Spook.
Sorry.
And we got extra double Spook this week.
Yeah, we got 2 scoops.
Scoops. You got
Yeah,
some ice cream over there,
scoops.
bro?
2 scoops of.
Did you bring enough for the class?
Oh, speaking of ice cream, I already want to derail this, by the way. Speaking of ice cream, so I'm not really like an ice cream person. I don't go out and buy ice cream and just like have it in my freezer, but I went and got, well, I didn't. My wife went and got some Tillamook, like malt, like chocolate malt or something like that ice cream.
Yeah.
They're on another level, dude. Like Tillamook ice cream is on another level. Like it's I've never had store-bought ice cream that even comes close. Ben and Jerry's, take a seat. Like nothing comes close to the creaminess and the texture of this. And Tillamook, if you're listening, you don't have to sponsor us, but just send me like another tub of that because it's their malt. It's a vanilla malt, but it has like little chocolate chunks in it, and it is just so damn good.
So
and
it's
I just
better
wanted to
than
talk
Breyers?
about that. Yes.
Really?
It's because like they make a point to say that they use more cream than milk in their ice cream, and it shows. Like the texture is fluffy.
The thing about Tillamook for me though is like I can't separate them from the fact that like I only know them from for making cheese. So like I look at Tillamook ice cream and I just think of cheese and I'm like, nah.
The person that told me about the Tillamook ice cream, they knew them also from cheese. And I didn't know about their cheese, really. I don't really care to know, but they're like, yeah, I love their cheese, and I saw that they made ice cream, so I'm like, well, if they have the same quality of ice cream that they do in cheese, then let's give it a shot. And they were blown away, and then subsequently I was.
No. I mean, me myself, I would not take that risk. I mean, it's like I'm not gonna like, these people make cheese and then they make ice cream. I mean, I guess since they're both dairy products, I don't think it's that far of a leap. But like, there's so many different ways in the process of making cheese compared to ice cream that I would be a little hesitant, I guess. But yeah,
that's where I stand. I'm like,
I think
don't know.
like cheese and ice cream isn't a large of enough leap for me to be apprehensive. But if it was like, oh, Oscar Mayer is coming out with a new ice cream, then I'm like, whoa,
It's bologna flavored.
Yeah,
let's calm down.
Yeah, but like I don't know, like I feel like cheese is like you're fermenting it, molding it, and you're basically cultivating specific types of bacterial processes. While with ice cream, you're like basically just mixing it. It's like you're almost like a cook / baker, and you're making sure the flavors are right, and then you freeze it. So
are you saying that if Oscar Mayer came out with a new ice cream called BOLOGNA, you wouldn't like jump right on top of that?
No, I would not, because first of all, I actually don't like bologna that much at all.
Fuck bologna.
Like, you should have known that. It's just terrible. And also, like, Oscar Mayer, when it comes to hot dogs, is the inferior hot dog, always, shapes and form.
What's the best hot dog?
The best hot dog. Well, if you're talking about beef franks, Sam's Club, which you can actually buy at the store and make yourself, amazing.
Doesn't Sam's Club just use Nathan's hot dogs?
No, so they changed that to where I don't know if they're Nathan's Beef Franks hot dogs and they just repackaged them as their own, but no, I read up because I actually looked this up when I was talking with him about getting them, and it was like a year or so ago, like a couple years ago, that they switched from Nathan's to like a different supplier, and they're fucking juicy and delicious and fat as shit. They're so good, and you could buy them in the package, 12 in a package, and just they teach you how to cook them. Like all you do is put them in a half inch of water, let that sucker boil for about 8 to 10 minutes. And that keeps all the moisture in them when you cooks them, and they plump. And then if you want that nice chaw in there, you can just grill them afterwards for like a couple minutes. And
I
just put it
never
in a bun.
boil hot dogs.
First of all, I'm just gonna throw this out there. If you're boiling your hot dogs, you're already fucking up. That's just my opinion on the subject. Like,
Okay.
I'll eat a boiled hot dog for the record.
Yeah.
Like, you're not gonna put a hot dog in front of me. I'm like, boiled, get this bullshit out of here. But if you're asking me to make a hot dog, I am not boiling that mofo.
Okay, it's not technically boiling them. It's kind of steaming them and boiling them at the same time, because a half inch of water, like these hot dogs are so thick, a half inch of water goes halfway up the hot dog while it's laying down inside. So it's
sure
not
they're
so
not
much
Nathan's?
boiling. I am 99.8% positive.
Oh, I see. Served in Sam's Cafe. Huh.
Yep.
Dude, I think why I'm confused is because my local Sam's Club still says Nathan's on the sign.
Oh, fuck them. Like, no.
This is what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Like, I
Okay.
just found out about that last week. Yeah, I will legit send you that package and so you can experience that.
I don't think you have to. I think, like, I'm not saying that my Sam's Club still serves Nathan's. I'm saying that, like, their signage says it, but they probably switched. Like, I imagine they did.
I mean, these look like some plump ass Franks. They do,
dude. I'm just gonna tell you though. Like, after eating Sam's Club hot dogs, I started buying Nathan's like quarter-pound hot dogs. They're pretty dank.
Yeah.
So I mean, they do taste different than these. So that explains a lot, because I was like, what the fuck are they doing back there in that cafe? My dogs don't taste like that.
Yeah, dude. Like, and I will say this, like, first of all, both of you, how do you cook your hot dogs, since you will not boil them? And I put up quotations.
My preferred method is just straight grill. If I don't have a grill available to me, then I'll just throw them in a skillet and brown them up. Me personally, I like a charred split dog.
Oh God,
like overcooked
you're one of those
hot dog.
Motherfucker.
Like,
Jesus Christ.
Like, I want to hear that snap when I bite into it, and I want that loud.
So why don't you just take a piece of charcoal and rub it on the hot dog and then have it that way?
I mean, yeah, if I didn't have...
I mean, I'd eat it cold if we do that, I guess.
Yeah, and like, I don't really have a great place to put a 40-pound bag of charcoal. You can't necessarily buy them one at a time. Can I have one charcoal, please?
So just buy a 5-pound bag, you nerd.
Dean, how about you?
I'm the same. Like, I don't necessarily like them split, because that's kind of whack.
Overkill.
But, if I wanted, first of all, I will say this: like, if what you're after is that crisp bite, just buy natural casings, dude.
Oh, I mean, I try to, yeah. Like, I don't buy hot dogs enough to really have a strong opinion here. If I do buy hot dogs, it's just like I get ballpark all beef or something, just something lazy like that, and I'll just cook it the best.
The right word.
Like I'll just cook it the best way that I have at my disposal at any given time. So I've had a deep fried hot dog. Those are really good.
What?
Yeah, those, like, hot dogs deep fry really well, and that is usually when they're split and they're crispy as hell.
That sounds like a huge Florida thing. Like, I'd never have come in contact or even heard of a deep fried hot dog.
Have you seen our citizens? Yes, of course it is.
God, I'm starting to look like your citizens. Like, fuck, dude. I just weighed myself, and I was like,
One of
fuck.
us.
I gotta lose so much weight.
I will say that, like, way better than Sam's Club hot dogs and I don't know how this turned into the hot dog podcast, but way better than that is the local butcher that's right up the street from us here. Their in-house hot dogs are so fucking good, dude.
Yeah, that's probably because they do the casing and everything themselves and like grind the meat
That's
to make
correct.
them right. Like, so like when it comes to stuff like, there's a level of when you get like, mass distributed, that nature, and then you get local artisan. Like local artisan 90% of the time does it better because that's what they're focused on. They focus on every detail when it comes to that. And like most of the time when you have to mass deliver it to different markets, you have to streamline the process to where you lose that individuality or that flair specifically that the local artisans have to pay attention to that detail. But yeah, I can agree with that. Like, I'm not even going to refute like, oh no, there's no way it's better than Sam's Club hot dog.
Costco's got a banging hot dog though. Like theirs is pretty famous.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna
never
put
had
this
it,
out
though.
there, dude. Like Costco's like in-house cafe or whatever they call it is massively overrated, and Sam's Club's is way better.
Yeah,
Just saying.
that's I found that out by happenstance because there was a Sam's Club right next door to us instead of a Costco.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I started eating their shit, I was like, holy fuck! Like I would go out of my way for a Sam's Club pizza. That shit's cheap and fucking delicious. Like they do it right.
Yeah, Sam's Club their pizza is great.
Oh hell yes! Like, and like you can get like fucking 2 big ass pies for less than $20. Like fuck me, man. Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But back to the hot dogs. So
hot dogs on pizza?
I'm gonna keep this short and sweet. So I understand where you guys are coming from. I don't know if it's because like how you guys tasted a boiled hot dog and like only the boiled hot dogs you had are probably like Ballpark Franks, Oscar Mayer's, or shit like that. Hoffy. But I've had the Sam's Club hot dogs the way that they suggest it, where you put them in a half inch of water and boil and like basically steam boil them for 8 to 10 minutes, and I've had them where they're just purely grilled. You lose a lot. You grill the juiciness out of the hot dog if you do it that way. Like if you put them in a half inch of water, boil, steam them, and then if you want to grill them to get that chaw on there, like when you get that bite, it's like juicy, delicious shit. Like it's so good. But if you don't want a juicy hot dog, that's fine.
So my response to that would be, having eaten many a hot dog in my time, is if purely grilling it dries out the hot dog, you need better hot dogs.
I can see that. That's totally fine. But that's what I mean. Like I would say I will cook it the inferior way if I get the superior hot dog bite. That's how I feel about it.
For sure. I mean, like, if the hot dog that you're eating demands that it be steamed, boiled, or whatever, microwaved, then do what you got to do. Like, whatever gets you the best product at the end of that chain is what you should do. But all things being fair and equal, like, I like the taste of that, like, grilled, little bit of char on there, and the flavor that's imparted into the hot dog that you just cannot get from steaming or boiling the hot dog.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So I do the steaming, boiling first, then I grill them on a grill pan afterwards, and I get the best of both worlds, basically. That's how I feel about it.
Mm-hmm. It seems like a lot of work for me, but
totally worth it. Especially since you also buy the fluffy sesame seed buns that they serve them in as well there.
Oh no, sesame seed buns for a hot dog?
Yes, sir.
That's weird.
Yeah, no, that's
never.
That's where
whack,
we draw the
bro.
line.
That's
Jesus
whack.
Christ.
It's just so different.
Oh,
I've never thought about ever introducing sesame seed to a hot dog bun. It's just been so ubiquitous with hamburgers.
I mean, first of all, sesame seed buns, even for burgers, is whack. But on a hot dog,
Yeah.
that's borderline blasphemously whack.
Fuck you, both of you.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's weird.
Though, like your response basically said it's whack.
There you go.
He's like, yeah,
Okay.
I'm not gonna fight that at all.
Yeah, I'm not gonna fight it at all. I definitely came on strong there.
Okay, you both just immediate disgust. Just
At least I owned it, Jordan. Oh my god, man.
What the fuck? Oh my god.
What just happened?
Nothing. I'm just basically rewatching some parts of Doctor Sleep because I want to just put this out there right now, and y'all can talk shit or whatever. Watching The Shining, it was not as good as I thought it was going to be because the whole movie was a slow burn, and that's like 2.5 hour slow burn, and it was too slow for me. Like literally 45 minutes in, they're already like 45 minutes to an hour in, they're already in the hotel by themselves, and I think the reason that it was done like that is so you can kind of feel the loneliness and cabin fever set in while you're watching the movie to get in that mindset, which good on them. And like it doesn't reach a head or a climax till like the 2 hour 10-minute mark where he finally loses his shit and trying to kill everybody. And then like his wife is like starting to see like what the hotel actually is, like with all the like guests with their champagne glasses and like bloody messes on their heads and like the skeletons covered in cobwebs, that thing. But like
so let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and jump into this week's topic. But what I'd like to do is kind of talk about The Shining, then talk about Dr. Sleep, and then kind of circle around to how we feel about them both.
Okay. All right.
In relation to each other.
Yeah.
So on that note, The Shining, released in 1980, directed by Stanley Kubrick and based on the novel by Stephen King, originally published in 1977. This movie, in my most humble of opinions, is one of the greatest films ever made.
Oh.
Straight up.
Oh. I can't. Like me myself, I can't agree with that. But keep going. I'm sorry.
Now we can have this discussion because I think this is going to be a really interesting one. But before we do, I'd like to hear what Jordan thinks.
So I've watched The Shining before this a couple times. I love this movie. It is definitely one of my favorite suspense movies out there. I know it's a slow burn. I know. Slow burn, low body count, very low.
That motherfucker is not a slow burn. It's a fucking goddamn simmer on the lowest setting on your stovetop.
Well, hold on. Let him go.
It is.
Right. Sorry.
Right?
I'm sorry.
And that's just the environment from which it was made, right? And it was definitely done on purpose, but it was also just it was 1980, right?
Yeah.
It's very different from how things are made nowadays, but I love it. I mean, every scene, you're at the edge of your seat. Jack Nicholson's performance is incredible. Everything he mutters, you just hang off of his word.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I really can't say any more as an overall opinion other than the fact that I really, really love this movie. I always have.
Yeah, so I'm really interested to talk to you, John, about this, given that you seem to be lukewarm at best on this film.
Yeah.
When I would consider myself something of a film buff. No, I would say film enthusiast. Like I love movies, and I've seen a lot of movies. But I wouldn't call myself like a connoisseur or somebody who's exceptionally knowledgeable about film.
Yeah.
That said, this movie is special. And I think that a lot of Stanley Kubrick films are special in that he takes an almost psychotic amount of care in the way that he makes movies.
Mm-hmm.
To that end, I actually watched or rewatched the documentary Room 237 after I watched this movie and before I watched Dr. Sleep. And there's some straight out there theories about this movie. But we can get into that in a little bit. Before we go into any of that, though, I gotta ask you, what is this movie about?
See, that again is a good question, and like honestly, I couldn't give you like a straightforward answer that I would wholeheartedly believe in. Like, there's a lot that this movie's about. It's like about could be about like working so hard that you lose track of what you're actually working for, like madness, actual like ghosts or fear. There's a lot of things that this movie touches on, but like I couldn't pinpoint what it actually is about.
What if I told you that this movie is about how Stanley Kubrick helped fake the moon landing?
What the fuck?
So,
all right, yeah, okay.
That one's not really working for you?
Mm-mm.
What if I told you that it's about white man's suppression of the Indians?
Oh
Yeah,
God! All right,
I can see that one.
Okay. Yeah. Wait, how?
So okay, let's back up for a second. So Room 237 is a documentary about basically about all these crazy theories that people have about this movie to a once again almost psychotic degree. And like I don't want to say that anybody in that documentary is psychotic or anything, but like the amount of attention that they pay to the movie and the things that they pick out of it to come to these conclusions about how it's about Stanley Kubrick's sexual fantasies and all of this crazy shit
Mm-hmm.
is just insane. It's actually insane. And I mean that in the best way. But one thing that's interesting about this movie is that Stephen King himself hates this movie. He actually hates this movie and is a little pissed off at Kubrick for making it.
Really?
Yeah. So near as I can tell, his big grievance with the movie is how many things it changes, which I haven't read The Shining in a number of years, but from my recollection of the book, having rewatched this movie, it's kind of close. Like he changes, he like removes the haunted hedges. Thank God. Um, adds some scenes, some characterization, removes other characters, little things like that. Like nothing insane. The only thing that I can think of that maybe really rubbed King the wrong way is that in the novel, he really plays up the fact that the hotel is built on an Indian burial ground. And that's kind of the crux of why everything is happening.
And in this movie, it's one line.
Correct. It's a
Yeah.
total throwaway line that he, and in fact,
The very beginning, right? Like right at the interview with the hotel manager.
It's actually when they all first show up. So when Jack, Wendy, and Danny show up there to take over, they're walking the grounds with everybody, and when they're walking across the front courtyard, he mentions it offhandedly.
Oh, okay.
But it is subtly hinted at the entire movie.
Yeah, you
so
hear it like you hear the chants whenever something is happening in the background. You hear like what I would assume would be like Indian chants or something like that, right?
And of course, most obviously, the scene where Jack is throwing the tennis ball against the Native American mural on the wall and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely comes up, but it's not nearly as like in your face as it is in the book.
Was that the first? Do you think The Shining was the first haunted Indian burial ground movie trope type of? Because it's been used excessively since that, right? I feel like most famously Poltergeist.
Well, Salem's Lot came out the year before this.
Yeah, everybody's been using that shit to death.
Or not. What am I talking about? Oh no, yeah, because Pet Sematary came out.
That was in the 80s,
almost 10 years later. So,
and then
yeah,
Poltergeist was also an Indian burial ground, and
that was the 80s.
Yeah,
that was 82. Yeah, so maybe it could be. I was looking into this because like I really fell down a rabbit hole with what people think this movie is about.
Yeah, I kind of got that.
It's because like when I watched it, I'm fascinated by this movie and how good it is. And when I watched Room 237, I was like, what the fuck? People actually think this? Like, I thought it was just a movie about Spook. and it turns out, no. I want to read to you guys this post that somebody put on Reddit. This came out before Dr. Sleep, and I think that's worth noting because some of the things that he talks about are debatable after watching Dr. Sleep or reading the book.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I want to put this out there. If we look at Kubrick's movie just as it stands for what it is, because it's definitely a different beast from the book, and the Dr. Sleep is based on that book, which never mind. Let me just read this to you, and like you guys tell me what you think about this. The title of the post is Jack and Danny Torrance both have The Shining in Kubrick's film. Says Halloran's speech is the giveaway. He reveals that the shine is a hereditary ability. His grandmother had it. That some buildings can shine, like the Overlook, and that some people don't even realize they have it. So, Jack Torrance doesn't realize he has the shining, which is why his mind starts to break when his psychic abilities interact with the hotels. Then his own dark leanings drum up a bunch of demons from his own mind, turning the inherently neutral building into a horrifying place. The hotel isn't destroying Jack. Jack is destroying himself.
See, that's an interesting take on it.
I don't agree with the hotel being neutral. Oh, well, I mean, after watching Dr. Sleep, a lot of that is answered, really. But
that's what I mean. And like we can get into that later, but like just looking at The Shining by itself.
I wouldn't say that the hotel was neutral because it already has a history and the interactions with the gold room, right? All three scenes in there, and the butler dude, him, right?
Well, hold on. What do you mean? What are you taking neutral to mean?
Neutral. So I heard neutral as saying that the hotel itself is shining, right? It has that ability, but it's not like I hear neutral and I think good, evil, neutral. Like, so we're saying that the hotel isn't inherently targeting and like a predator itself.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't get that. Like, I always thought that the hotel, like, that was the premise of the movie, and that's why they brought up the previous killing with the two daughters and everything. Like, the hotel was a predator.
Okay. I can see where you would get that impression.
Exactly, but like maybe like that just might that like again you could think of it as just like that might have just been a state of cabin fever that person had. Like that might be an isolated incident that had nothing to do with the hotel whatsoever. That's why I will say implanting that little like nugget of folklore and like previous madness, death incarnation was genius because it makes you think. It's like, oh, is the hotel fucking with people, or did that dude just go crazy? Because living up there in that big ass hotel without anybody else other than your family for 5 months in those times could drive you insane.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, not even in those times, because they explain that, in the locale that they're in, you have to imagine that things like cell phones and the internet would be difficult, if not impossible, for that particular location.
Yeah. One thing
It
that I
might
don't think
actually be worse now, because like going up into this abandoned giant hotel with nothing but like you and your son and your wife for, what was it, like 3 months or something like that, with no outside contact whatsoever, if when you're used to like the internet and shit like that could, I think that could easily drive a modern person insane.
Yeah, like not being able to use your own imagination or like cultivate your own, like know how to cultivate your own thoughts, feelings, or whatever
I
without
mean,
the use of technology or another medium.
I think nowadays they would just bury the cables and they wouldn't have to deal with outages. Like the fact that the telephone's going down and everything, it's like just bury the cables. Like, what's
I
wrong with
mean,
that?
Yeah.
I say that from the perspective of somebody who lives in Florida, where a power grid is dog shit to begin with, who loses the internet and power all the
All the
time.
time. Yeah.
All the time. And I'm not in like a rural mountain cliff. Like,
Well, it's yeah. I mean, it's because we don't bury cables here, and that's because just
yeah,
we live
that's,
in
I mean, that's fair.
we live on a limestone and sand death trap. But one thing that the movie maybe it explained, but I did not get it.
Okay.
Was I understand the two girls, I understand the mother, who we'll talk about, and the father who did the killings, all being there. But there were other ghosts that were there too, and you especially see this in
Mhm.
Doctor Sleep also when he
Mhm.
lets them all out. But are we just to assume that the hotel has been a predator for for even before those times, and like the other ghosts that are there are just previous killings, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would clarify that I understand where you're coming from, but I definitely would not consider the hotel to be a predator, a malicious entity in any way, really. But to answer your question, like, yes, the insinuation is that many people have been killed here, have died here due to one reason or another. And he just failed to mention that.
I think it's more that the hotel is more of a conduit because of everything that happened there. And I will agree with the Redditor's post to a certain degree that the combination of Jack and Danny being there, like Jack unknowingly has the shining and Danny like has an inkling of what he can do, like just set the hotel off like a powder keg, in my opinion.
Well, what was
Right.
set up? What was set up was that none of those ghosts were a direct representation of the hotel. They were essentially the ones that were attracted to those who shined. And like the first instance that you see this is the scene where Danny goes into 237 and he gets, strangled or attacked by the mother, the tub woman.
Mm-hmm.
But then when Jack goes in there, it's a different experience, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Which I can't openly explain that right now, but it seems like they were definitely focused on Danny, and they leveraged Jack to do the like. This is all very like first layer stuff. They leveraged Jack to kill him so they could then feed off of his um,
Shine.
off of his steam, right? And I guess I can subscribe to the theory that Jack shined and being in that location kind of crosses wires and was made it a little bit easier to maybe manipulate or target him. But I mean, if he did shine, why wouldn't they just kill him right away? right? Like, why would they leverage him to do the killing? Why couldn't the ghosts just kill Danny themselves?
Well, yeah, I think the most of that was because the ghosts didn't really have a pull or a sway over anybody that wasn't like looking to do bad shit.
I
I
mean,
think
they manipulated the hell out of Jack, but could they
yeah,
just not manipulate Danny because he's just more powerful or has more shine?
he has more shine and he wasn't as receptive as Jack was. Like Jack, since he probably didn't know that he had this ability or this extra sensory sensitive, that he would just thought it was like all a dream, coupled with like being alone for so long on top of the stress of making a good book in said time with his job. So he just took it all in stride, where Danny was like, hell no, this is scary. I want nothing to do with it. So I'm going to try and push back or stay away from this as best I can.
I guess what's interesting is that Danny, with his ability to shine, he knew before he ever even got there that there was
Yeah.
something wrong with the hotel, but Jack was really gung-ho about it. You don't think that if he had a little bit of shine, he would have been a little more apprehensive about going or seemed a little more uncomfortable? Like, he was very, very into it. I mean, I don't think that he was ever really there throughout the movie. Even in the beginning of the movie, he seemed like like he was already kind of checked out. He already had some issues with himself. But I'm just surprised if the if Stephen King and his intention was for Jack to have a little bit of the shine, he didn't listen to it, or he didn't feel bad about the hotel at all, where other people that did had that feeling.
Yeah.
Here's a particularly interesting theory that I want to posit to you guys. What if I told you that there is no spook in this movie whatsoever?
No ghosts.
No ghosts, no spook, nothing.
They were just like a metaphor.
Not so much a metaphor, but like a visual representation of the character's madness.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
metaphor. You know.
And like, so how would you explain the wife seeing it as well? Like at the end?
Because at that point, they've all just kind of fucking lost it.
Okay. All right.
If you think about it, over the course of the movie, it starts out super tame.
Mm-hmm.
And as the characters succumb to cabin fever or whatever we're going to call it, it gradually ramps up and gets worse and worse and worse. And most importantly, nothing supernatural happens in this entire movie.
Yeah.
Let me clarify that a little bit. Nothing supernatural that can't be explained through the characters being crazy and shit like that.
Yeah.
Well,
Like there's nothing overtly supernatural.
What about the choking scene? Are we to believe that Jack actually choked Danny in that scene?
So we don't know.
I want to be clear. Like, I don't know that this is the case either.
Sure.
It's definitely wasn't Stephen King's intention. It may have been Kubrick's, although I don't necessarily believe that. But if we were going to entertain this idea, yes, the implication is that Jack did it.
That's hard to argue for, because you could use that same train of thought on any type of movie with ghosts that have the main character eventually kill somebody. You know, there are a lot of movies like that. So you could say, well, they were just a representation of his psychosis or something. So it's hard to argue it. It really is hard to argue it. I don't believe that. I think that there were legitimate spooks there.
So I think the best argument for it in this movie in particular is Jack himself.
Yeah.
Because as you guys were talking about, even in the very beginning, before anything happens, before he really goes to the Overlook, he's already not quite right.
Yeah, definitely.
Uh-huh.
It feels off.
And we know from the very beginning that he's an abuser.
Yeah, an alcoholic, and I don't know if
and
that
an
stems from
alcoholic.
something from his like father. So like he already has like crippling vices.
Well, so he's an alcoholic, but I think the larger vice than his alcoholism is his guilt for hurting his son.
Mm.
Because
I can
that
definitely see that. Yeah.
he
I would call that sort of debatable, but go on. I'm interested.
well, he brings it up in the scene um where his wife thought that he choked Danny, and he's like, "You never fucking let it go," right? He just immediately starts going on about that. He talks about it in the gold room with the bartender, I believe, if I
Mm-hmm.
remember correctly. I really do feel that the guilt of that experience, because it's not like he frequently abused his child. Like, they never made a case for that. They just said that he did abuse alcohol, right? And
Yeah, for sure that's the case. Like, there's
yeah,
no question about that.
so it was one instance, and ever since then he stopped drinking, and he became sober, and he tried to make it better. But I think that he still harbors a significant amount of guilt for that abuse, right? And even though it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't intentional, he had a real big coming to Jesus moment afterwards. So I think that he
Uh,
like that manifests itself a lot in his psychosis throughout the movie, even more than
I
his
I could
alcoholism.
I could definitely see that. I think that there are strong arguments to be made that that's not necessarily the case, but for sure, I think that that's a totally valid interpretation. I think if I were to directly challenge you on that, I think that if he's not inherently an abuser,
yeah.
then the only explanation for everything that happens is that the hotel or the spook within the hotel has a extraordinarily direct impact on what he does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
And I also think that even if he has guilt and shame for what happened with Danny, he definitely has real vitriol for Wendy.
Oh, he fucking hates Wendy.
Oh my
He
god.
he literally I honestly believe that this whole thing with Wendy would have come about at some point regardless of the hotel.
Yes.
You're definitely right. But also he brings up the incident, a few times when arguing with her. That's why it stood out to me so much, is that like that's the kind of, if you get into argument with somebody and start blaming them or bringing it up, and it's something that they did wrong but they still feel so guilty about, they get defensive, they get aggressive, and it's not necessarily because they dislike you or they hate you, but it's because they hate themselves so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, although it can also be said that he's trying to deflect the blame. So, in as opposed to reading it as guilt, he doesn't feel guilty so much as he's sick and tired of hearing about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that yes, like that's like his initial like id reaction is to not bring it up because it does trigger him, but I think it's the guilt that drives a lot of that. Because whenever it's brought up, he gets that guilt, he feels bad about it again, and the cycle repeats. So a lot of times people in those positions, just from my experience, have just resorted to anger, right? If they're
Sure.
serial abusers or something, then they just get angry because they do feel guilty enough. And once you get past the anger stage, which never happens in this movie, once you get past the anger stage, then it comes to them usually accepting and breaking down, and it's a whole fucking mess. But like that's just from my experience, that's kind of how people usually react. But
Right.
I try and with The Shining, I try and just take it on face value because you can get lost in the details. So I'm just trying to like start there, right? Like at its first level, right? How do I understand it? And then if I understand it at a first level, then you can go deeper and go, okay, Now, what could they possibly have meant?
Yeah, and I will say that for all the thoughts and theories and questions that you have at the end of this movie, I think that most of them are answered in Doctor Sleep.
It,
Yeah.
it
They
definitely
directly
opens.
address most of them.
Yeah, it definitely opens up a lot. Yeah, and I mean, it helps, of course. Yeah.
So, I thought you were going to keep talking.
I
You're
could
just
have,
kinda
but
like,
I mean, like there are definitely a lot of parts of this movie that I love and I would love to talk about.
yeah.
Theories abound.
So you guys can tell me if you disagree, but when I was watching this movie, I identified 6 important characters, or rather, maybe the 6 most important characters, which would obviously be Jack, Wendy, and Danny, um, Dick Halloran,
Yep.
the Overlook Hotel itself, and Tony.
What about Mr. Grady?
What about Mr. Grady?
Well, he was the one that seemingly was influencing Jack directly. That was a whole conversation in the gold room and everything.
I agree, but like you could make a similar argument for the woman in room 237. Like
He's the one that. Oh, you know what? Actually, you brought up
or
the
the
point.
twins.
I know, but Mr. Grady had a more direct interaction because, and circling back to nothing supernatural happened. He got let out of the freezer. So
I
are
was
we?
so hoping you were going to bring that up.
So are are we to believe that Wendy let him out, or was he
Nope.
never locked in the freezer, or was it actually Mr. Grady that let him out there, or was the whole freezer just a metaphor, maybe of him being unconscious throughout the entire time or something?
So, well, that last one is a really interesting theory that people go really in depth on, but there are 3 explanations for how he got out of the freezer. Because my interpretation is that he was absolutely locked in the freezer. Like I would say that there's no fucking question that he's locked in the freezer.
Yeah.
So, with that being the case, there are 3 explanations. Face value, Grady lets him out. Ghost did it. It's supernatural.
Yeah.
The second explanation is Wendy let him out, but that makes no fucking sense whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so for me, the third and the only explanation that makes sense, if it wasn't supernatural, is that Danny let him out.
No. That doesn't sound. No. No, not at all.
Why not?
Why would Danny let him out knowing that his dad was out to get them to a certain degree, on top of like he was running around trying to find a place to hide from his father. There's no reason why he would let him out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a minute since I've seen this movie at this point. But didn't that happen after he got out of the freezer? Or well, is he in the freezer or is he in the fridge? You know, it doesn't matter.
Fridge. It's a fridge.
It's
no,
not
it's a storage.
Fridge. No, he's in the storage with all the canned
dry
goods and cereal.
Dry storage. Yeah, you're right.
Yes. So it's not anything cold or anything like that. And no, actually, you are correct. He was first put in there. Then he got out, got the axe, and did the chopping of the doors.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, you're all right.
Because my recollection was that Danny had no reason to be afraid of him until after he got out of the dry storage. So
true, but also Danny, or in that sense, Tony, who was possessing Danny, was basically in the room asleep the whole time.
Well, Tony's not possessing. Tony's not a character per se. Tony's The Shining.
Yeah.
And during that moment, you could say that Danny was pretty much checked out, and he was just on an autopilot, being protected by his shining ability. You know, that's where the whole red rum thing came from, and warning his mother right before, right before he got there with the axe. And I think that he knew. I think that he knew even before then what was going to happen. So I don't think I can subscribe to Danny letting him out, knowing that Tony was protecting him in a sense. I don't know why he would ever let him do that.
Well, remember, if we're subscribing to the idea that nothing spook happens in this movie, then Danny doesn't shine at all. So he doesn't know anything. He's just losing it just like his dad is.
Yeah, I can't get on board with that one.
Neither can I, but I'm just putting it out there. Like, that's one of the many theories that kind of exists out there in the ether. And I think it's an interesting interpretation of the movie. I think watching the movie with those kinds of ideas in mind can really lead you to a profound viewing experience.
If you go that far with it, I think the only explanation for the freezer scene is that the pantry scene.
Just call it a freezer. Nobody cares.
Is that he was actually never in there, and it in itself was a metaphor for him being knocked out and falling down the stairs. Like that's the only way that I could get on board with saying if there are no spooks, if there are nothing supernatural, everything is just because they're in cabin fever and they're all psychotic or going psychotic, then the food pantry scene never happened. Then that was just a representation of him being knocked out, or that was a representation of his mind and the battle between his conscious and unconscious psychosis, I guess, like communicating with one another, and then Mr. Grady representing his, psychotic side, or whatever that side of him, which is going on a murder, wants to murder his family, lets him out, sets him free, and essentially gives him the okay to say that this is, I now release you, please go and, be a fireman and start chopping down doors and stuff, I guess. I don't know. I haven't thought about it long enough to give a great example, but I can kind of see it if we really want to dig that deep, but I don't think that they ever intended to go that deep. I think part of the genius of the movie is that you have the ability as a viewer to go that deep. They don't
to interpret it in your own way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think most great movies allow the viewer to
come up with their own interpretation,
develop their own canon for things, and that's part of the fun of it. No one comes out and says like Dick doesn't show up and go, "Oh, this is all real. Look at them ghosts over there." Like he never fully just opens up. And honestly, Dick's arrival is just, it's sad because he doesn't do like
anything.
Well, no, he technically did save them. But
because he brought the tractor.
Well, that, and also him just arriving at that perfect time saved them, because it distracted Jack and let him leave to go and kill Dick. So he inadvertently saved their lives, because if he didn't show up, then they were dead. But at least Wendy was.
Yeah, I mean, Wendy was probably screwed, although that's sort of debatable since she still had the knife.
True. I mean, you're right.
Like if she really wanted to, she could have just stabbed Jack in the face and be like, "Here's Jack," and it's all over. But
yeah, true.
That wouldn't make any sense for Wendy as a character, and like if you think of them as real people, like a real person. Probably
she's very passive, and she puts up with a lot, man. But and actually, I think Mr. Grady says it best. Is she's a lot stronger of a person than they imagined that she would have been, right? Because they had expected all this to be already been taken care of, but because she was just stronger, had more will, had more love for her son's protection, that it was making it more difficult to Jack to really do whatever he wants to.
Yeah.
So my second favorite theory about this movie is that it's about Stanley Kubrick's guilt, remorse, apology, maybe, for faking the moon landing.
What the fuck? How?
So
you need to give me a breadcrumb trail to follow that shit.
Okay. So I'm going to put an image in the Discord chat for you here really quick.
Okay.
And it notes 4 major things.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that it shows you here in block number 1 is Danny wearing this Apollo 11 sweater.
Mm-hmm.
The 4th block in the very bottom right is the pattern on the carpet. That pattern on the carpet happens to exactly match the launch pad from which Apollo 11 took off.
Uh-huh.
And actually, when the ball comes rolling at Danny, the same way you would drive up to said launch pad, he then stands up from that area with that sweater on, with which turns to be like a literal representation of the rocket taking off,
shooting off. Yeah.
right? In our nice little bottom left square here, you see Tang, which they infamously took on that mission.
Good
And
Lord.
fucking all over the place in this movie, by the way. Like, it's everywhere. And then, of course, room 237, which we'll come back to room 237 because I have a lot of thoughts about room 237. But as it pertains to this particular conspiracy theory, room 237 represents the studio in which they filmed the fakery. Jesus. And how you don't talk about room 237, you don't go to room 237, so on and so forth.
Uh-huh.
Now, there's way more than that. Like, there are people who have taken the fact that they wrote room number on that little key card in that way to represent the fact that that's supposed to say moon room, and just craziness, absolute craziness.
Jesus Christ.
Like, people have taken the numbers on that, like room 237, and like they add them up in such a way that it points to, like, it's just crazy shit. It's absolutely nuts.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's the basic gist of the idea. Like, those are like the major high points.
When did the so The Shining came out in 1980. When did the film actually take place, though?
That's a good question.
When are we like what's the setting of the film?
1970s, non-specifically.
Okay, so let's non-specifically. So we don't exactly know when it took place.
Right, just sometime in the 70s.
So if it was early, so how old's Jack? 6, 7? I mean, sorry, not Jack. Danny. Yeah, how old's Danny?
Let's see. Danny Torrance is 5. He does not look like a 5-year-old, but you know what? He's supposed to be 5.
Well,
he's a big ass 5-year-old.
Yeah, he is.
I wonder how old Danny Lloyd actually was. He was 8 in the movie.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, I was just like, God damn, dude, he's 5.
So the character is supposed to be 5?
Yes.
Okay, so I can understand a 5-year-old wearing an Apollo 11 shirt, because that was like, I don't think we'll ever be able to know what it was like going through that time, but like that was like
down the schools, and like everybody brought out a television, and like everything stopped.
Yeah,
for that moment.
Exactly. America stopped for that moment, so it would have been incredibly impactful for a 5-year-old to see that. However,
well, hold on. I will note that depending on when in the 70s this is, it would be kind of odd for a 5-year-old to be fascinated by that.
That's where I was going with that next, is that this would have to literally have been like 1970, because if he was any younger than 4, he wouldn't have remembered that or at all, maybe, right? Like, so this would have had to have taken place either 1969 or 1970. I don't see how 1971 and on would be like this, unless his parents just want to dress him up in like Apollo 11 merch because he's a young kid and it's cute, right?
That could also be the case. Like, you don't choose your outfits when you're 5.
So it's kind of Tang being on the shelves. Tang was fucking everywhere. It, like, we know it because of the Apollo 11 launch, and it's like, oh, they're drinking Tang on the moon, but like that shit was everywhere back then.
No, that I'll throw that argument out right away. Like, this is a Kubrick film. That Tang was not there by mistake. Like, Kubrick is such a maniac that, like, there are photos of him arranging those cans on the shelves in very specific orientations. Like, the tang is not there by mistake. I don't know what he intended for that. Maybe it's just to set up the time period and shit, but like, he very, very much put tang there on purpose.
Okay.
Nah, you know
I
what I
think
thought
setting
when
the
I
period
immediately saw
sounds.
that? I was just like, the fact, like, oh, there's Tang and Kool-Aid right above the black cook's head. Yeah, I see where you're going with this, Kubrick.
I mean, maybe it's just, I don't know. A lot of times these things are far more innocent than we allow them to be. So it could just be Kubrick wanted to have the Kool-Aid and Tang next to each other because that's where the people store them. And it just so happened.
I will tell you
I don't
this.
know.
There's two explanations here. One, Kubrick is making a statement, whether it's about the moon landing or something else, I don't know. Or no, actually, that's it, man.
That's
Like,
basically
the tang
it.
is there for for a reason. Like, it's not just that, like, oh, tang was popular or whatever. Like,
No, I mean, I get it because, like, if you even look around, like, all the shelves, like, you got S&W and like basically like canned, what is that, vegetables, and then there's just randomly Tang and Kool-Aid right there in that shot,
in a way that
clear in
no
view.
human would ever store things in a pantry.
Yes.
Like, it's like total chaos. But
Yeah.
again, it's total chaos in a movie directed by a man who doesn't do anything by accident.
Yeah.
So he wanted, like, when you have that shot of Dick looking at Danny and like they're having that telepathic exchange, you can see the Tang and the Kool-Aid and the S&W behind him on purpose. Even though it doesn't make any sense for them to be on that shelf, like, they're very much there on purpose. He's making a statement. And maybe his statement is that Kubrick is actually a racist. I don't know. I really doubt it, but
I don't associate
my
Kool-Aid
point
with
is that
black people. I don't know if that's a thing. I mean, the first I hear of it.
We're not going to touch that.
I mean,
The point
I don't. I mean,
Just
it went
leave
over
it
my
alone.
head. I don't know. I never
Yeah.
made that association.
it was over his head too. Oh, got it.
I don't know. Like,
Jesus
maybe
Christ.
he is. I don't know enough about Kubrick to know, right? I mean, the innocent side of me just says that he set up everything in this thing to look like a legitimate storeroom, and that's just what was behind him when he took the shot. I don't know. Like why is I don't know.
I mean, like,
I can't argue for it. I can't.
Yeah, I mean, like, I understand that, but like, I mean this in the most sincere way I possibly can. Like, that's not the case.
Yeah, I will agree with Dean. Like, I don't even, because I don't pay attention to directors most of the time. But I know for a fact that I noticed, like, things that he was like mentioning everything in that dry storage, and everything was next to each other, like as should be. Like, there was Rice Krispies next to Rice Krispies and like other cereals. Like, everything was organized except for that area. Like, literally, you see vegetables of certain brands, and then you got Tang and Kool-Aid. Not just Tang, Kool-Aid, and other like dried drink mixtures like sweet tea and that kind of shit, but just Tang and Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's how, like, even not knowing Kubrick as a director as well as Dean, like, I was like, there's something about that, because it was literally in a shot where you wouldn't have to freeze frame it or pause it to see it. Like, it was in a shot for a good 5 seconds.
Like, we're talking about the director that infamously harassed Shelley Duvall on the set of this movie the entire time so that she would be as manic as she's supposed to be in the movie. Like, he's that level of fucking crazy.
Yeah, and I will say this, like, this is an aside, and I said this to Kim, like, I think Shelley Duvall is not attractive whatsoever, and I don't know if that was on purpose in casting, but like, it's just, to me, it was jarring. I was just like, I don't know how much I can watch of this.
I mean, they didn't do
this
her any
actress.
favors.
They didn't. They really
she's
didn't.
she's not supposed to be. Like,
Yeah.
even in the
I get
novel,
it,
she's
yeah.
supposed to be a really average
Yes.
housewife.
And
So like
they nailed that.
they picked the perfect actress to do that. I'm not trying to be an asshole about it,
No,
but
yeah, I know.
like usually when it comes to a leading lady, a leading role and stuff like that, like straight up just like, what's the word I'm looking for? Unapologetically, like, they're usually pretty. And it was
Okay.
just it was different to have someone like that. Like, even when they're supposed to be like plain and stuff like that, they're still like to a societal standard and like, you know, like magazine and whatever, like they're pretty. Like most of the time they have to put makeup on them to make them more dull.
I will say this, that she actually won a Razzie Award for her portrayal of Wendy in this movie.
Yeah.
But I think that that's grossly inaccurate. Like, she did not deserve to. Her performance. First of all, the fact that she put up with Kubrick's bullshit on the set of this movie is cause for an award in and of itself. But
Yeah.
her performance in this movie is grossly underrated. She's
Yeah.
an incredible actress in this movie.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not taking away from her acting ability whatsoever, because she played the role perfectly. Like when she was getting berated by Jack, it's like it was nothing new to her. She was like,
Yeah.
"Oh,
Yeah.
okay." And like the only, like basically the only reason, like a lot in those times and a lot in those kind of abusive relationships, the only reason that she is with this man who berates her and like makes her feel less than and like that she's not worth anything is for their child, is for her son. And the only reason she will leave is if her son is in danger. She doesn't care about herself. She only cares about her child. And like he's the breadwinner, he's making all the money, especially in those times to where she couldn't make ends meet without Jack. So that's I totally understood that. She played that role perfectly. Like no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
I actually agree. I thought she was fantastic. I loved it. She nailed that character's spirit. She was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the time she was seemingly helpless and took punches,
Mm-hmm.
and she was so destitute, right? And so like defeated half the time, and just trying to like grasping at straws to keep any any form of sanity together, or trying to keep her family together. I thought it was perfect.
Yeah.
To today's standards, you look at some of her line delivery and like, oh, that seems a little rough. Like that line felt kind of weird coming out of an actress's mouth, and like the cadence of the dialogue was kind of weird, especially next to Jack Nicholson, which was incredible in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
She felt very stiff, but I thought that actually kind of worked out in her benefit. Her character was more or less shocked half the time, stumbling, overwhelmed,
Yeah.
and I thought it really worked. I thought it really, really worked.
Yeah, exactly. Like again, my statement about her appearance is purely from a shallow standpoint and like what I'm used to when seeing like leading ladies in film, like even especially actually back in those times or where like they literally like the leading lady had to be gorgeous. So I get that probably the casting choice was because of that. I mean, I was told from Kim like she was actually a supermodel of some sort. But
Shelley Duvall?
I guess I don't know, maybe. But what I'm saying is like I just thought it was different and I noticed it, but like her acting ability, like I'm not trying to take away from that with that comment whatsoever, because like she again played that role that I would expect for a woman in that situation of those times. 100, because like literally it was a huge surprise to me that their first interaction that we see on screen when it's just her and Jack is like he's literally like browbeating the shit out of her and cussing her out just because she's like asking how things are going. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like it's not like, oh, this isn't the hotel. Like this is a regular occurrence with between the two. Like she's used to being browbeat, berated, cussed at just for doing something as rudimentary and very minute as checking on how your writing's doing or like seeing how you're doing when you're concentrating.
Right.
And it was I was like literally I was like, oh, this guy's an asshole, but I can see why she's with him or why she stays with him because of what he provides.
So, with all of that being said, why don't you like this movie?
So I think one of the main reasons why I didn't like the movie or I didn't enjoy the viewing experience as much as you guys is I was paying attention at the beginning of the movie to every little detail and everything like that, but it was just such a slow burn that my mind wasn't engaged as much as I would usually expect it to be, because I have noticed, this is again a personal thing, that if my mind is not engaged, like it's not being active and it's not being challenged, it will shut off. It will literally be like, and I'm not talking about shut off like, oh, like I'm like a zombie. Like I will go to sleep because my mind was just saying, oh, you're not really using your brain power or anything. Like we're going to conserve as much energy as we possibly can. It's sleepy time. And this has actually been things that I've had in like work meetings to where like they're just droning on and on about this shit that doesn't matter or like, and I'm not engaged whatsoever. I will literally fall asleep in a meeting. It's like I'm compelled to just conserve my energy and nap right there. And the thing about this movie is, as even as much as I was paying attention, like there was not much going on, and I think that was actually by design, which I understand. But to me, for my viewing experience, that's why I couldn't be as engaged in the movie because my mind was just like, I mean, you're into this movie, you want to watch this movie, but nothing's engaging you. So it's like you can not pay attention. You could take a nap. It's fine. You're not going to miss anything. But I feel that's a flaw with me and not the movie itself because I again understand why it was created that way. But like I still can't say like I had an enjoyable viewing experience because of that. You know?
Do you think that if you saw it again, you would have a different experience now that you know where to set your expectations?
Yes, definitely. But I will say this. If I didn't watch The Shining and watch Doctor Sleep, I would not have liked Doctor Sleep half as much.
Oh,
Like,
for sure. For sure.
yeah, like Doctor Sleep by itself as a movie is great.
Mm-hmm.
Doctor Sleep as a continuation of The Shining is a fucking masterpiece. In my opinion. Just from the beginning scenes alone, and then the ending scenes, like all the callbacks, all the moments that you feel from The Shining that had weight, impact Doctor Sleep tenfold. That's why I feel like to enjoy Doctor Sleep to the fullest, watching The Shining is a necessity.
Yeah.
And not just because The Shining is heralded as like one of the best movies of all time, like always on top 100 lists of like you need to watch this movie, especially during the season of Spook. But it just makes it so good. Like, you would miss so many things if you didn't watch The Shining before watching Doctor Sleep. And that in turn makes me kind of upset that box office wise, Doctor Sleep didn't do well.
Oh, is that right?
Yep. Critically, it was good, but box office wise, Doctor Sleep did not do well. It was actually a flop.
It's got lower review scores than I thought that it would have, and I checked. I checked it
exactly.
after. I checked it after I watched the movie, not before, and I was actually surprised.
Yeah, because I remember when this movie came out, and I usually go to like RottenTomato.com, aggregated scores or anything like that to like kind of get a temperature of if I want to see a movie or not. Sometimes if I'm on the fence, and like I saw Doctor Sleep like was super low. Like a lot of people didn't like it, and like box office wise, by the money numbers, it didn't do well in the theaters. I don't know if it was because opening opening with something that was of higher note, but it just surprised me.
Honestly, the scores for The Shining are lower than I thought they would be. I haven't checked them until just now.
People hated that fucking movie when it came out, dude. Critics and audiences alike fucking hated The Shining when it came out. I wonder if Doctor Sleep was let's call it a disappointing success, because it still made its budget back almost twofold.
Yeah.
But because it was called Doctor Sleep and not like The Shining 2 or something.
Yeah.
Very confusing. Yeah, and actually the Doctor Sleep reference was extremely slight. Like, maybe
it's an interesting title pick given the circumstance.
Maybe the book, maybe it's emphasized more in the book than it is in the movie. But I mean, how often do they even talk about Doctor? Like they bring it up like, twice. Yeah,
it was once. It was literally once. And it was the first guy that he basically counseled to the other side. Which, and I probably think in the book you probably get more time of him in the nursing home, because again, that's 8 years of him in that nursing home, like guiding people to the other side. And like that's probably how he got the name Dr. Sleep. It was probably from different people putting that together, not just the first person is like, oh doc, oh Dr. Sleep, oh yeah, you're right where you need to be. The first person that he meets, you know what I mean?
And it's interesting. Well, I think he kind of insinuates that there are more people. There were other people before him, but
I think in the movie it was just, that was the first time that he ever did that with the first guy that called him Dr. Sleep.
However, before we get to Dr. Sleep,
yes,
I do want to call out the one issue that I have with The Shining, because otherwise I think it's basically a perfect film. And that is Room 237 itself.
Oh, okay. All right. Continue.
Because from the very first moment that Danny brings up Room 237, which is the first time we hear about Room 237, Halloran is kind of like, don't talk about Room 237. Don't go to Room 237. You have no reason to think about Room 237, blah, blah, blah,
like,
blah.
He straight up lost it when that room was mentioned.
Right. And
all composure.
Right. And so you as a viewer are expecting all hell to break loose if he goes into Room 237. And while the scene that we get in Room 237 is absolutely iconic.
Both scenes.
Well, I would say probably only, because we never see Danny go in. So really only the one.
Yeah.
Like we see Danny go up to Room 237. We see the moment that he's going to go in, and then it cuts away, which by the way is fucking genius.
Yeah.
That takes the already like anxiety that you as a viewer have about Room 237 because of that conversation with Halloran, and cranks it up even more. You're like, what the fuck goes on in that room, man? And then you see Danny come back and he's been like accosted and his sweater's ripped and shit. You're like, what the fuck is in Room 237, man? So all of that to say, like when we actually see Jack go into Room 237, and I say only, but what's in there is the infamous bathtub woman scene,
Mm-hmm.
it left me a little unfulfilled because there's so much build up to that moment that for that to be all that's in there, I was kind of like, it makes me wonder if in the book there's something really significant about that room, or if Kubrick is trying to make a really subtle point about it. Not to put too fine a point on of it, but like maybe if this whole movie is about the moon landing or something like that makes a lot more sense than if you look at it at pure face value.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty bold statement. You want to explain it?
Well, I just mean that like if his point is to apologize for the moon landing or whatever, that subtext for the room gives all that build up meaning. In other words, like if that really is supposed to represent like where he filmed the moon landing, you can't talk about it and bad shit happens to people who talk about room 237, et cetera, et cetera. Like that makes perfect sense. In the context of the movie, it's just another ghost in that room. There are ghosts fucking everywhere in this hotel.
Exactly.
There's not even anything particularly special about that one ghost, except that she's manipulative, I guess. But so is Grady's way more dangerous than she is in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't even take down a child. So, and I mean, in fairness, she's also the only ghost that physically interacts with anybody in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, like it just doesn't do much for me, at least as a viewer.
I guess on face value, being that it was the room where, you know, the mother was murdered, and I don't know if the twins were murdered in that room. I don't think that they were.
No, they were murdered.
No, they were in the hallway.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, you're right. So like the mother being murdered in that room, that's where they stayed, right? Like the previous Grady family stayed and everything.
Do we know for sure that that's who that's supposed to be?
Oh, that was my assumption, was that it was Grady's wife.
It's mine too, but I'm curious if we know that for sure, if that's just what we're like led to or what. I actually don't know.
That was my assumption. Was his wife, and the old looking bloated corpse was her, like that's, you know, the body sitting in water until it was found months and months later, so it's all bloated. But yeah, that was my assumption. So, and that's why
so I found out the woman's name is Mrs. Massey. She was an older woman who came to the Overlook to have an affair with a younger fellow. One night, the younger man stole her Porsche and left. She was heartbroken and killed herself in the bathtub with sleeping pills and liquor.
What? I thought, okay, well then I don't know what I thought then, because I always assumed that was Grady's wife. So is his wife in the?
I don't think so. But the way that the movie kind of like surrounds that one event as opposed to the other ghosts in the hotel, like I thought the same thing.
What's that? What? So why highlight that room if it's just because there's a ghost in there constantly?
That's my point. I think I broke Jordan.
Well, I'm googling it now to try and get some more freaking context. Goggling. I'm not gonna be able to find this fast enough. During the winter, so he went mad, killed his family by killing 2 daughters with an axe, and shot his wife with a shotgun. Do we see the wife?
I guess that right there throws the theory that she's in there.
I just assumed it was his wife, and then he just like shot her and left her. Didn't when they panned over and they had her in the mirror and you saw her, like, didn't she have like a wound in the back of her head?
No, I don't know. I was distracted by the giant decaying wounds on her back.
Yeah.
I could have sworn that I thought that because she had some large wound in the back of her head. But I mean, I guess she would be the ghost itself, right? As the old woman would be too old.
Unless we were like I was
thought
assuming that the younger woman was actually her.
I thought so too, and that this like she just was bloated and just looked fucking weird.
Because she was in that water for so long.
Right.
I guess if they explained that, I totally missed it. I mean, I don't know if they ever did, but that went right over my head.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So turns out we were horribly wrong, but that just supports what I was saying even more.
I mean, well, my whole thing is that it's fun to think about the moon landing stuff, but I mean, that's obviously a complete bullshit conspiracy theory. So, like, I don't want to give too much credit to it, right? So, I don't think that's what it is.
Don't get like taken away by the fact that I brought up the moon landing thing again. I was just making a point.
It's just fun to think about. I know it's just fun to expound on it. But so then,
well, not even that. It's just, my point is just that like if he had some like deeper subtext for that room, I missed it. And so for me personally watching this movie, the room is this giant build up to almost nothing. That's my point.
I guess you're totally right.
100%.
I mean, I guess I never understood it until just now having a conversation about it, but they never really explained like
why room 237 was such a horrid place, like what actually happened.
Yeah.
Like you have to make assumptions.
Yeah, and honestly, they never even talk about the other ghosts that are in the movie outside of you just seeing them, you know? Yeah. Because you just assume that it's just Grady and his family that went insane and that they're haunting the whole place. The rest of it is just to be assumed that there were just other people that died there.
I will say that there's one important note about room 237, and that is the moment that Danny goes into room 237 is when shit really starts to hit the fan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Sort of insinuating that him going into that room is what, as they put it in Dr. Sleep, woke up the hotel. And if that was his intention, I guess it kind of works, but nevertheless, the fact that they showed it is what broke it for me.
Yeah.
I guess because him going in that room gave him a direct interaction with a ghost. But
with the spook?
He saw the girls. Didn't he see the girls before he went in that room?
Multiple times, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I don't.
Yeah, it doesn't. That's. But again, that's my point. Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, there's really no good explanation that you can give to that room that makes it work, in my opinion. It's just it's an iconic scene when Jack goes into that room for sure, and for good reason.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
But it's super disconnected from the rest of the film, I feel.
Some of my favorite scenes in the whole film were the gold room.
Actually, speaking of favorite scenes, John, I want to ask you, because I got the feeling when I was watching this movie that even somebody who's never seen this movie before is watching it for the first time. There are numerous scenes in this movie that are so iconic that you would probably still be like, oh, it's that scene. Oh, this is where that happens.
Yes.
Was that the case for you?
Yeah, I mean, like, I already knew what was coming and, like, what scene was derived from what. Like, the most iconic use of those scenes for me was from The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror.
Yeah.
Homer. I was thinking of a title of the book. All work and no play make Homer something go crazy. Don't mind if I do. And like exactly. And like I remember that. And then like, give me the bat, Marge. Give me the bat. And then like that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, so this is where all of this is derived from, like shot for shot, panel for panel. So yes, like everything like stood out when it hit the apex after Danny went into room 237.
The other thing that I wanted to note is how intentional and specific to detail this movie is. So from like little things where when Halloran is talking to Danny and he reacts like a kid actually would, just like, oh no, just kind of shrugs, doesn't really look at him, doesn't answer his questions. He's just kind of really uncomfortable around this older guy.
Especially asking like super personal questions. Like he's like, I just met you and you're like trying to like pry out my deepest, darkest secrets.
Right. And to other things, like if you take the time to notice when Danny's drinking that glass of chocolate milk, you can tell that there's actually been milk drunk from that glass. Or the way that that Jack acts when he's quote unquote having a drink at the bar with Lloyd, and he starts actually acting inebriated. Like it's just like really unnecessary attention to detail that elevates this movie to a level that most don't reach for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, with that scene where he's having a drink and talking with a bartender, like you do, like bartenders are like poor man's therapists, to be honest with you, just free therapy. Yeah. So like that scene is just seems so organic. Like, yeah, like if you're having a bad day and you go to a bar, you're taking a drink to get away from your problems, and then there's someone there to talk to you about them. Like even if he's not talking back or you don't even know if he's listening, like it's someone to vent to, and it was perfectly done. And like Jack Nicholson and his expressions were just amazing. Like the way that he moves his eyebrows, his smile, like facial contusions, like all that stuff just elevates something so mundane to another level. Like I actually thought like, is he really talking to someone? Is there someone there? And like it's not like a ghost? I don't know. And then like when his wife came and interrupted their conversation and there's no one there, it's like, okay, that was in his head, I think. You know what I mean? Like that in itself was pretty high level.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes towards the detail on moving day, all the little interactions that are happening around them as they're doing the tours, focusing on footsteps when Danny was getting away from Jack at the end. Just so much, right? And that's the thing that saves this movie a lot, is because it is a slow burn. It's the details that you can get lost in which make that burn, at least for me, it made it less of a burn, because I was just so visually stimulated the entire time with all the different shots, the different angles, just all the slower scenes of the movie, especially in the beginning. The beginning of the movie is really, really slow, but they did a really good job of filling every shot with as much detail and as much purpose as possible, so it felt just natural to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure, dude. Like as somebody who knew the whole movie front and back and what was going to happen and all that, like watching those little details and picking out little things like the impossible window was really fun.
Wait, impossible window?
Oh yeah, so the hotel manager or owner or whatever, his office, that window that's behind him that faces outside is actually facing a hallway in the hotel.
Oh, weird. I missed that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which again, for somebody like Kubrick who's so meticulous about details, that means something. Don't know what, but it means something.
Yeah, and like see, one thing about the hotel and its like shadowed past, it doesn't make sense, because like if you thought the hotel was malicious in any way, don't you think there would have been more incidents? And then why is it okay, the reason that the hotel shuts down and that they clean everything out is because like there's always a huge snowstorm, and like nobody can get to it for 5 months, I guess, right?
Right.
But even then, like, to have more than one instance of whoever the caretaker was of going batshit crazy and killing whoever they're there with should throw up some red flags. There should be some history about the hotel to where it shouldn't be as lucrative or as a tourist spot as it is. Because, like, when they're moving out, like, everybody's hustling and busting. There's a lot of people in there. You kind of forget, like, the next scene, there is just going to be a family of 3 in this huge hotel.
Well, remember, John, Jack has always been the caretaker.
Jesus Christ.
So a couple of things that I did want to point out. My personal favorite scene is the one where Wendy turns into the gold room and it's just fucking full of skeletons and cobwebs and
Yep.
shit.
Yeah.
Because for one, that's like the most campy, hokey fucking thing in the whole movie by a long shot.
Mm-hmm.
Like it sticks out like a sore thumb.
Mm-hmm.
But if you pay attention, all the skeletons are exactly where they were when Jack was in there, and they were lively ghosts.
Okay, yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
So all that to say, what was your guys' favorite scene?
My I think my favorite scene was actually, I've said this like 3 times already, but the gold room. Jack's conversations both times with the bartender, because Jack Nicholson, that monologue there, that conversation, he is just so captivating. I mean, it just sucked me right in, right? Like it can't be ignored. His acting in those moments. Just any scene with him monologuing or having, like, obviously the staircase scene is iconic. You know, light of my life, I'm not gonna hurt you.
Bash your head
Yeah,
right the fuck in.
like that scene.
Yeah.
That scene's incredible too. But I think the gold room, and it's the 3 times he goes in there. The beginning, when it's empty, the second time it's a little more lively and he sees just the bartender, and the third time when it's a full party. That in itself is a metaphor to his decline, right? His growing psychosis. And I just loved that. That was a very obvious metaphor for me, and I loved every moment that he was in that room. And then especially when he talks to Grady, and Grady then is directly intervening and speaking with him and influencing him to make the right choice, saying, "Oh, they've been really, really bad. You know, they need to be punished." I love those scenes. Definitely, I think those are my favorite.
John, do you even have a favorite movie? A favorite scene?
Yeah, I do. It's actually the same thing, the monologue, Jack Nichols, because when you're having a bad day, when you're having like shit piled on you, or even that's what you perceive is happening, you do that to yourself. Like, you don't need to be in a spooky hotel, like with ghost inspectors to talk to. You literally have that monologue with yourself, going over the problems that you perceive, or people, the problems that people perceive that you have. And Jack Nicholson, like, embody that. Like, anybody who watched that scene can relate to that without being alone in a cabin for months at a time, on top of a recovering alcoholic who really wants a drink. Like, anybody can relate to everything that Jack was feeling or saying in that moment. And it was just so good. It was so well put together. Because on top of that, it's like, was he talking to a ghost or was he talking to himself? Like, it doesn't matter, because you can relate to what he did. You don't, and like, the answer doesn't matter, because it has no effect on like how the movie plays out after that point.
I just want to say, Poor fucking Wendy, man. That poor woman gets put through the ringer, dude.
Yeah, she does.
She didn't deserve any of this bullshit.
She's a survivor,
really
though.
didn't.
She is a survivor. That is
Yeah.
for damn sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's two things about this movie, and we're gonna wrap up this movie pretty quick because we gotta talk about this other bad boy that we watched because I got a lot of thoughts on that one too. But there is two other things that I really wanted to bring up before we move on from this one, and that is the way that like they just like casually smoke around each other and Danny in this movie.
Mhm.
Really strikes me watching it in 2020 because like not only would you never smoke around a child like that, generally speaking, I mean, I know there's some people that do it, but that's neither here nor there. Like generally speaking, certainly not in a movie or anything, but to like just light up a cigarette in front of somebody in your house and then offer them one is just such a weird and foreign concept now that it really caught me off guard. But what totally caught me off guard and something that I didn't remember was in this movie is when Grady just casually drops the N-bomb.
Oh, it's the hardest end I've ever heard, almost.
It's
and then Jack Nicholson says it back to him. I was like, holy shit,
God,
dude.
That was so jarring.
I totally fucking forgot about that.
It was a hard ER too.
Oh, there's no, like, he wasn't trying to be cool, man.
Yeah,
like,
it was rough.
He's one racist son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Yep. Product of the times, 1921.
Absolutely. Yeah, 1920s. I don't know, if, maybe 21. I don't know the specific date.
For Grady, though?
I mean, the party was definitely like a flapper party. It looked like it was the 20s. So I think Grady, I think they mentioned that in the 50s.
Do we know that Grady was part of that, though, or were those just random ghosts behind him?
I think that was just random ghosts and stuff that like the majority, for some reason, were having like a party in 1920s.
Right. That was what I thought, too.
Yeah.
Like, for some reason, I got the impression that Grady was not too long ago. Maybe because that's the one incident that they actually bring up to Jack in regards to the hotel when there were clearly many.
Well, I think they bring that one up specifically because it was about a previous caretaker, so it's closest to to his situation. The others could have just been intermittent deaths. Well, obviously were intermittent deaths. They weren't other caretakers.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. He was born in the 60s and died in the 70s. Wait, what? That doesn't make any sense.
Grady wasn't the direct previous caretaker. He was a few before Jack. Oh,
right. My bad. I was reading about the Grady twins. I was like, wait, he was like 10? What the? No, but like, if his twins were only like 10 when they died, so he would have been like the last caretaker. So that makes perfect sense why he would bring that up to Jack.
Was he the one right before Jack, though?
He must have been, because
I didn't get that
if they died in the 70s and this movie takes place in the 70s,
I guess you're right.
Must have been.
I thought it was a few caretakers before him. I didn't realize it was directly before his post.
Yeah, that actually makes perfect sense because he brought it up to him because it's pretty likely that Jack could have heard about that incident. Okay. And so you don't want to just like not mention that. But you could forget about all the other shit. Like, yeah, it's in the past. Don't worry about all that.
Jack makes a point to say, "Oh, they didn't tell me that in Denver." Yeah, they left it up to you to tell me.
So that makes sense. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to ask you guys about is that final shot. What do you think that means?
You mean where he's in the photograph cheering like with everybody else
in 1921?
Yeah. That he's finally a part of the party. Part of the hotel.
Yeah, I thought that was just symbolism to say that he's now a part of the hotel. The same way that Grady wasn't a butler or a servant during the 1920s, but when he died there, he took on that role for some reason, and that's further brought up and expounded upon in Doctor Sleep also. But I just took it as he's just now part of the hotel ghost lore. I don't know.
Interesting. It's just interesting to me because Grady does mention to him earlier in the film, like, you've always been the caretaker here. And then you see him in that photo from 1921.
I thought there was some connection, but I could not for the life of me start to think about or put together any reasonable any reasonable explanation as to how, like, if he was like the caretaker was reincarnated, if he was possessed at that time, if this is all something significantly larger than that first layer the movie displays to you, and it goes way deeper than that. I couldn't even begin to understand how that was related. I always thought that was just Grady putting it in like everyone, like all those ghosts, like he had a role, the bartender, the ghost in the gold room, like it was him reacting with Jack as if Jack was already dead and part of that ghost crew, right? That group of spooks. So it was like, no, you're the caretaker. You need to take care of things. He's like, that's why you're here. We recognize you as the caretaker. You know, I don't know. I really don't have much to say on that other than I just took it as at that point he was already accepted and just made part of the hotel's persona and group of ghosts that were there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't thought enough about it to give you a really good breakdown of it.
I honestly think that's a great explanation. I think that works for me.
Holy shit.
What?
Apocalypse?
What?
I'm just saying. 100% agreeing with Jordan's explanation.
Oh,
got him.
Did you guys have big wheels when you were younger?
No. Yes.
I did. I did.
Actually.
I fucking loved my big wheel, man. I would have loved to ride it around in a hotel like that.
Dude, that's such a incredible setup for a scene. Like I was watching that in the movie, I was like, man, this is awesome shot. Whoever came up with this is a fucking genius.
Yeah.
Like filming him behind him, and then like those tight cuts around corners, like you feel like something is always going to be there. And for the first couple times that you see it, nothing happens until it eventually does. Until he sees
it's
twins.
Actually a little bit. It kind of creates even more tension when you know that he's eventually going to run into the twins that way. Because then, and you've forgotten like when it happens. So like every time he turns a corner, you're like, oh, nope, no, 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 oh my god, there they are.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was funny. Like I've never actually watched that scene at all. I just know of it.
Mm-hmm.
But when it flashed to like their bloody, chopped up corpses, I literally was screaming, and Kim was like, "What? What's going on?" I was like, "Never seen this movie," and then they did it again, and I just screamed while I was talking to her. I was just like, I did not know that was going to happen.
Speaking of things that we didn't know were going to happen, Stephen King eventually wrote a sequel to this book.
Mm-hmm.
In 2013, that would be, what would that be? 36 years later?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
86, 20.
That's almost a real-time representation
36.
of the story, too.
That was his intention, yeah.
Yeah, because I think Danny was at least in his like maybe late 30s, early 40s in this movie.
He's supposed to be in his 40s, yeah.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's literally 1-to-1 then.
The Doctor Sleep, released in 2019. John, you really like this movie, huh?
Yeah. I immediately fell in love with this movie from the beginning. It's just like it was just fucking just you know that one GIF where that chick has a whole bunch of hot dogs blown at her face? It was like that, but with callbacks from it's just instantly started off from the same point that the movie left off from. And it was not just from that movie it started off. It was also like two stories in one. Like you see this chick in this woods, like with a hat on, coaxing this little girl to come over to her, and then out of nowhere, like dudes come out of the weeds, and I'm just like, if I was that child, I would have broke to the left real quick. And then you also see like the aftermath of what happened to Danny and his mother and how they coped with it. And it was coinciding with each other. It's like basically these two parallel worlds, these two parallel stories that you knew were gonna converge at one point. And it was just a really good setup. And again, as I said before, like if you didn't watch The Shining, you would miss so many good things about this movie. And then the fact that Danny has Doc as basically the embodiment of his conscience. I mean, not Doc, Dick Halloran. And as the embodiment of his conscience is like basically teaching him, even after he's dead, it's like, this is what my grandmother taught me. And it just builds off of that. And it's a movie to where, unlike The Shining, but again, this is my viewing experience, that I knew that I had to pay attention, and I was gripped from the very beginning. And everything was just so interesting. It's like, oh, there was actually like a whole nother world where there was like many people who had the shine, and like you kind of related. It's like, oh, this is just like telepathic or like psychic abilities, and like people had different levels of these abilities. And it's like, oh, you're a pusher. We haven't had a pusher in the group for a long time. It's like, holy shit. Like it just built off of the world that The Shining started into this whole like universe, and then like a good versus evil fight. It was just really good. It was really good.
What'd you think about this movie, Jordan?
I had no idea the context of this movie other than the name. So I just knew that Doctor Sleep was a sequel to The Shining. And I just knew the title. I knew nothing. I didn't even freaking know that Ewan McGregor was in the movie. When he showed up, I'm like, oh shit, Obi-Wan.
You're our only hope.
Yeah. So like I had no context at all. I was just going on and knowing that we were going to watch this, I was just thinking of the title Doctor Sleep, and I was just coming up with like what that title could mean and what the movie could be about. And it completely shattered every possible scenario that I had in my head for what the sequel to this movie would be. It is so different than The Shining. It doesn't feel like a horror movie. Okay, it's not a horror movie. It barely feels like a suspense movie. It kind of borders like action at some points. It's just such a weird film, but I loved it too. I actually loved it. It felt super bold. It took The Shining to almost like superhero level kind of stuff, but at the same time it was still relatively grounded, and they didn't explain enough of it to where you could have your own cool little headcanons with certain things and how long people have been alive, and the hunters, or the group, who they were and how old they were and how different powers worked. And I thought it was cool. I thought it was really bold. It's definitely later Stephen King-esque, because like his later books are a little more like that. Like I read Under the Glass Dome, which is like, when you think of a horror writer, you don't think Under the Glass Dome, but that's like, that book's really fucking weird. But I liked it. I like the movie a lot. I don't like it more than The Shining, but it's also a very different movie than The Shining. It invokes very different emotion, so it's hard to compare them. but I liked it a lot. What about you, Dean?
So I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Like I knew Ewan McGregor was in this movie, but other than that, like I knew that it was the sequel to The Shining. I knew it was called Doctor Sleep, and that was about it. I didn't really know what to expect going into this. And that first scene where they just like gang up and kill that girl, I was like, holy shit, dude. What they're like cranking this movie up to 11 right away. And then as I kept watching it, I was kind of like, doesn't really feel like it's even in the same universe, much less a sequel to the beyond the fact that the storyline is obviously a continuation. Like it doesn't really feel like a continuation of The Shining.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it's a very different movie.
Yep.
In my opinion, it's a demonstrably worse movie. But I don't know that that's to say that this movie is bad. I really don't know how I feel about this movie.
Wow.
In some ways I like it, and in other ways I really don't. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that like you were saying, they full on just made them fucking superheroes at some points.
Yeah, it definitely kind of felt like that. It also felt a little tropey.
Yes.
Like with the girl, just her powers awakening. She's just super OP, you know, and it just didn't feel like a sequel to a psychological horror suspense movie. It felt like if there was an extra 30 minutes of the movie to explain the hotel and maybe explain who Dick was and maybe some like childhood trauma that just was not even related to the hotel but goes into why his father was dead. You didn't even need The Shining to begin with, because you could have used that extra 30 minutes is a lot, maybe an extra 15 minutes of just exposition outside to build a trauma that would have Danny act the way that he does and suppress his abilities the way that he does, and exposition around why the hotel is so specific and why it was used and to ultimately take her out at the end. But it's very jarring. It was very jarring for me, but I was really thrown into it as well. Like I kind of like John, I was really captivated by just them running, like taking the Shining power and running with it. I already love that kind of stuff. You know, felt very anime to me, but I still enjoyed it a lot. But I definitely recognize that there's a lot of kind of basic tropes in it and some relatively obvious twists, I guess.
There were twists in this movie?
I mean, kind of
No,
a little bit.
That's what I mean. Yeah. No, I'm sorry to cut you off, but like
That's fine.
there was no twist because like it was pretty fucking straightforward. Like that's what I mean. Like this was the way I saw it. This was basically a redemption arc for Danny and him being a mentor / model like Dick was for him, but to a higher degree. That's how I saw this movie, as a continuation to The Shining.
Okay, well, now that we shut Jordan's shit down entirely,
I made a point
twists
to talk.
Were you referring to about?
I'm trying to look. There's a few moments there. I thought I made a note of it that like the only point in the movie that I felt like was a twist. I can't even remember now. I guess a certain parts of it, I was never taken off balance. Like I was never like, oh my god, I didn't see that coming. I kind of saw it all coming, and it was straightforward. But I guess the initial this is towards the end of the movie, but the ambush where they took out like most of the not pretty easily, and then also the very end where she realizes whose mind that she's in and almost gets captured but doesn't, and then Danny ends up dying in the movie. Like, that was a little bit twisty. That's kind of all I had to say about it, is that it wasn't super straightforward, but I kind of just at that point leading up to it, I was like, okay, I think Danny's probably gonna die and he's gonna fuck with the boiler and blow the place up, and I don't know.
Yeah, because fuck that hotel.
So I actually didn't put those together until they like actually spelled it out for me. I was more enveloped in the fact, like, okay, he let everybody loose and like they killed the main antagonist, but like immediately after they turned towards him, and I was like, oh shit, did he die? I didn't expect him to get possessed. I thought that he was going to get straight up swallowed up by the hotel, and then the hotel was going to try and take on old girl, and then she would have to fight her way out.
I'm not gonna lie, I thought the whole possessing Danny thing was fucking stupid.
Yes, that's how I thought about that. I was like, no, that's dumb. I would have had it to where Danny would have basically sacrificed himself to take out the main antagonist, who he agreed was more powerful than them both at the time, and then she would have basically had to get out of the hotel using her own power and basically watch it burn. Like, basically, like, after the hotel was trying to drag her in, and it was like, you forgot what room Danny came in first. You know, like something like that.
So was the whole, of course, the possession of Danny and him running around, that's supposed to parallel what happens in the first movie with his father, of course, right? But is that the explanation then? Like, is that our explanation as to why Jack acts the way he does? Did the hotel directly influence his actions, and that's just it? Like, or did the hotel just do something different this time and directly possess Danny after? I mean, we don't really know what happens other than that he was being fed on by the ghosts. So the woman, I forgot. I have her name written down somewhere, but I'm not looking at it right now. She disappears because that's what they do. That's what the people in the knot do, because they don't really explain if they're alive or dead. It's one scene where the pusher asks about it, and they're like, does it really matter? And that's just all
like, do you care?
That's all they leave it at, right? So it's assumed that they're some type of spiritual entity, and they're not necessarily mortal. But maybe Danny was possessed because he was still mortal, I guess. I don't know.
Well, the way that I saw it, like, so to your earlier question, no, it's not the same thing that happened to his father. The father was subtly manipulated due to his, anxiety, madness, or whatever you call it, by the hotel, because the hotel didn't have enough pull or power to actually physically like possess him or do anything. Like, again, like like they barely did anything. Like, they touched Danny and tried to like choke him, couldn't do it, and then they opened a door, like a door where he was locked, and that was about it. The hotel just dealt in subtle manipulation of the lonely people at that.
But it's like,
the reason that they had the power to possess Danny is because after they feasted on old girl, they were more powerful. Like, you notice, like, when she arrived, like, the lights were like beaming, like almost about to burst from the psychic energy that all three of them gave the hotel. And then they fed on one of the most biggest batteries that they could get a hold of, other than the girl. And then now they had the actual power to physically possess someone at that point. That's how I saw it.
So they just leveraged an old tactic to just have someone kill, her in this situation.
Frankly, that explanation is even worse for me.
That's fine.
I don't know. What do you interpret it? I mean, what do you think? Because I don't think that he was. So he obviously wasn't psychotic. He was being possessed, but the possession itself doesn't necessarily make much sense because it was never built on. It was just assumed, oh, they possessed him. That's what, just accept it.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, it's one of two things. Either, like you said, oh, they possessed him, which is stupid, or they possessed Jack in the first one too, and we just didn't know that, which is also stupid. So,
I mean,
from my perspective, no matter how you look at it, it's just a really stupid thing.
I mean, yeah, I mean, and not everything that's probably in the book. I'd be surprised if that specific part wasn't in the book. I doubt that they tried to also influence Danny. They wouldn't have been able to, right? So they had to have had him be possessed. Or
I mean, they tried when he was sitting at the bar. They were trying to do the same thing they did to his father, even using a really bad Jack Nicholson lookalike.
I thought it was
to do
both.
that.
I thought it was weird that they reshot those scenes, but I understand why they had to do it.
Yeah,
But it was kind of weird seeing them be reshot.
yeah.
They didn't reshoot the elevator scene though.
They
No,
didn't reshoot.
no, that was cool.
What you mean with the blood?
Yeah.
Yes. That's the original shot.
Oh, but it was in color. No. Wait, what?
The fuck?
It was always
the original movie was in color.
Hold up.
What
I'm confused.
What special edition did you watch?
No. I am confused. Okay.
Where the blood pours out from the elevator and everything. And then it's funny in Dr. Sleep, she looks at it. Is her name Andy?
Something.
Is it Andy?
Who?
The main woman who's running
Rose?
the knot. Rose, thank you.
Rose.
Yeah, Rose looks at the blood coming out the elevator. She's like, "Oh, that's cute."
Yeah.
That was a little bit of a weird reaction. And how she didn't she didn't seem to understand where she was. Maybe because all the ghosts from that place were already trapped in his mind, but I just assumed that she would have she'd be more cautious and she would be more aware of what the hotel was.
I don't know. She seemed to kind of comprehend the sort of location that she was in, but she just wasn't. She's really flippant about it.
True.
It's like,
it's
whatever.
I think she was more focused on killing the people who basically took her family from her. She was more focused on that and getting revenge. Like she was straight up like, "I'm gonna make you scream for years, and you're gonna die in pain."
Which,
like,
for the record, I hate characters like that, dude.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh yeah, well we did all this awful shit, but fuck you because we failed." Like, now piss off. Nobody.
I mean,
come on, this is fucking stupid.
I mean, like, do you hate them being written like that? Like, do you not like the trope, or do you like, or is it just really effective for you to not to hate them at that point?
No, I dislike the trope. Like, I feel like it's what am I trying to say? Like, it's just not well fleshed out. Like,
you like more self-aware villainous characters to where it's like, I understand why you killed us. Like, yeah, we did some horrible people, but we're all like, he's basically saying we're all trying to survive, and this is how I'm surviving. This is what I do, and like, I understand why you did it. That's why you can understand why I'm taking my vengeance on you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, kind of like that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just something a little bit deeper than like, oh my god, you killed my family. Like a character who understands that they're doing evil. Like, she seems like the type of character who's just living minute to minute or something. Like,
well, I mean, it's probably due to the fact like they have lived for so long, so you create this whole God complex and hallucinatory world to where she was like, how dare she strike back at us even though we're basically coming to kill her.
I mean,
and
yeah, I agree.
It's more that you're offended that you would even try and do something like this. Just like, be my food and just be happy that you're going to be this for me and that you're going to live through me, like that kind of ideal.
I think that reaction came from just an unyielding confidence of doing it for seemingly hundreds of years at that point. It never really goes into how old she is, but that really is spoken to when Abra is getting driven back to her by Crow. Should have wrote these names down, right?
Crow Daddy.
Crow Daddy, thank you. Yeah, because his
Fucking
dialogue.
hate every single character name in this movie.
His
Rose the Hat and Crow Daddy and fucking Abra.
I loved that.
I'm
though.
sorry. Go ahead.
I loved it.
I'm just not even gonna.
Anyway, his dialogue was essentially just stating exactly how they feel, right? Everything you did was pointless because the outcome is going to remain the same, and it's overwhelming confidence in that god complex that's been fed into over hundreds of years of doing this, countless lives consumed. So I understand that she's still like she's mad that they killed them and that's like her main drive, but she still feels like a god. She still has unyielding confidence because she was the leader. She feels that she can walk into anywhere and do exactly whatever she wants at any given moment. So it's like, in the end, it's her hubris that definitely is her downfall because she's pretty shallow. She just wants to chase them, find them, and kill them. There's no strategy. There is just a blinding confidence that if I'm in the same room with them, they're going to die, regardless of what's being set up at all. And I thought that although it's a little bit of probably like a lazy trope, right? Because you can just put that character wherever you want when you're writing them.
Yeah.
It's still, I guess it makes sense if you want to just assume that they feel like gods and they just are not used to or have never experienced this level of defeat. So
resistance.
Yeah, and they go into, I mean, the one guy, the old guy, how they talk about his past, you assume he's been alive for thousands of years.
Kings, popes,
Yeah,
they wrote stories and fairy tales about you, like that kind of stuff. I was like, oh, okay.
Like you assume he's been alive for thousands and thousands of years. So like imagine the hubris being developed when you think that you're going to live for thousands and thousands of years. Like they just, I don't know. It definitely made sense for me, but it worked because I ended up hating her even more. She was just an obnoxious punk who was just like curious that someone was so powerful. She was weary of it because she was getting pushed back so much, but she was like her curiosity and her hunger is what overwhelmed her. Exactly.
She kind of strikes me the same way as the Translucent from The Boys.
Yeah.
Like I'm
so glad you started watching that, by the way. So glad.
Just so unbearably confident and like just really, really susceptible. I don't
yeah, because if you think about it, like just to talk about The Boys for like 2 seconds, if you think about it, if Translucent told Homelander that he like felt like this was a threat or like this dude did this, it would have been over. Like show over, first episode done. Like nothing they could have done about it at that point. But again, circling back to Dr. Sleep, it's just like I noticed when she was talking to Crow Daddy, which is her basically right hand man, second in command. He was like noticing. It was like, dude, she got you, and this has never happened before. She's obviously has too much raw power for you to handle. Like, and she also like has a bead on you yourself. So he did the smart thing, which a lot of people in this group or these people that have like this level of confidence to where they haven't met any real resistance that they couldn't handle. He did the smart thing. He was like, you stay here so she can't know we're coming or track us, and we'll like ambush her and get her ourselves. That way this is the safest option and you can keep an eye on her from far away. And I was like, holy shit, like that's actually, it was a really solid plan, other than the fact that they fell into her trap. But even Crow Daddy saw through that.
I mean, what surprised me throughout that exchange, and I recognize that we're skipping right to the end of the movie to talk about all of this, but is they didn't know they were being tracked, right? So they didn't realize that she had the glove and she was able to track them. So they thought that they were just going to show up and find her and just, just surprise her. But still, the overwhelming hubris and confidence that they express with just showing up in an RV with all of them together, no plan other than just to overwhelm who's ever there. I mean, it's just like you would think that they had been alive for so long that they would take any number of precautions other than the one that they took with Rose. You would think that they would do anything else than that.
The thing that bothers me about that is like, if Crow Daddy sees through this plan and goes and he captures her, why wouldn't he say shit to them and just let them all get murked?
I think, see, that's something that they didn't explain, and like I will say is a flaw. Is like, I think it was because Crow Daddy basically had 2 psychic sense, so he sent one group to where he sensed like the main force, to where he sensed that there was 2 or 3 of them, like, you know, Danny, his friend, what's his friend name? Billy, Danny, Billy, and the girl, and then the other where he sensed her as well. I think that's why it was like, and he got lucky and he went to the one that was barely guarded by anybody.
I mean, do you think that he knew that was going to happen, or he just laid another contingency out there just in case and got lucky that he was ultimately right in doing it? I think
it was he laid a contingency.
Yeah.
Because again, they said multiple times they haven't dealt with anybody this powerful. Like, basically, they said that nobody has been this powerful since basically Rose the Hat. Like, and what I saw from Rose the Hat was when Crow Daddy asked us, like, she's this powerful, are we going to eat her or are we going to turn her? And then Rose was like, no, we're not going to turn her. We can eat her for years. Like, we don't need to turn her. Like, I think she was seeing that as a threat to her.
I agree.
Her power in the knot.
Yeah, that's how I took that as well. That it probably would have been best for them as a whole to try and turn her, but Rose didn't want to give up her position because she
seat
knew
of power.
Yep, she knew that she would have to then play second fiddle to her. But Rose,
oh hell yeah!
I mean, they mentioned how powerful Rose is and why she's in charge, but she never really flexes that power. I mean, she finds Abra and everything, but the confidence that Abra has is jarring sometimes.
Well, that's because she's what, like 13, 15?
But like, she just is, I mean, just so confident. I mean, it's nuts. She's like,
no, it's not. It's understandable, because if you think about it, every meeting that she's had with Rose, she's come out on top. Like, basically nothing has touched her. She's able to track them. She tracked with a put the boy just by trying. Like, she was exuding a lot of power and coming out on top in every instance that they bumped heads.
I guess it was the first scene though when Rose found her room and she laid a trap for her. Like, just knowing, well, if they're gonna find me, I'm gonna lay a trap. You know, I'm gonna set a trap and I'm going to invent a new power and go into her mind and read all the things that are there and absorb as much knowledge as I can for the limited amount of time that I'll have to do this. It's just that just unwavering confidence was just, I don't know. It was just, it was weird.
She's a teenager. Like, the thing of, like, the real difference between someone who's lived long without any opposition and a teenager is the fact that they both think that they're going to live forever. Like, nothing can hurt them. And what sets teenagers apart from people going into their 20s and 30s is they've come into those obstacles where they have been hurt, and it causes them to create defenses against that by, like, oh, I've gotten this relationship and it hurt me badly, so I'm not going to trust anybody after that. That kind of thing. Scarring up over your wounds. And since she was basically a really teenager with immense power, immense raw power, and has not come up to any opposition that she hasn't won against, of course she would be confident to an insane degree.
So Rose mentions that she sees a lot of herself in Abra. Do you think if the motivations were different, and they got to her before Danny did, do you think that Abra as a character would have actually joined the knot?
No, she was too set in her ways, and she was naive. Like, she didn't have any real purpose to join them. Like, oh, live forever is like, I don't need to live forever. Like, I'm happy as is. So they would basically have feasted on her, like Rose said. Like, Rose was right in the fact that if she joined the knot, she would be too powerful to control, especially after they taught her more about her power and she got to use it more often.
I mean, Snake by Andy, the blonde girl, she had no real reason to join either. But fact, I mean, because she wasn't too much older than Abra would have been. I don't know. Like I can kind of see where Abra maybe would have joined. Like she could have been convinced to joining them. But like if she didn't see that young boy's death so vividly, I think that she may have. I think that there's a possibility she may have actually joined the knot.
Yeah, so the differences between Abra and Snake by Andy, even though they're the same age, which is a really good stroke, master stroke, to where it shows like two parallels, two girls, is their background. Like, even Rose said, like, she came from a troubled past, like, where she probably got sexually abused, and that's why she's lashing out on these guys that are coming after young girls and making sure they never forget. She's basically her own crusade to make sure no other young girl has to go through what she went through. And with Abra, you saw from a young age, like, what was it? She's like 8 or 7 at her birthday party with the magician. Like, had like a really nice house, loving parents, big ass party, nice cake, and she can use her powers and her parents didn't freak out and put her in an asylum. Like, she had an amazing life. Her dad was all talking about, yeah, you need to study because you're going to Harvard. Like, they could pay for Harvard. Like, comparing those two, why would she basically like, oh, I have a really good life, I don't need to live together, compared to Snake by Andy is like, everybody has taken advantage of me my whole life. I've only been able to watch out for myself. Fuck the world. I'm going to live my life to the fullest and screw everybody else that's in my way to accomplish that.
I guess the only way that I could see her possibly turning was not the draw of living forever, but being around people that are as powerful or close to powerful as her, because she didn't necessarily know there were others like her. So that curiosity and that sense of, I don't know, sense of community might have drawn her in. But it's so hypothetical. It's, I don't know. Like, I can see a part of Abra because she is just so unwaveringly confident. I can see her, possibly being intrigued if circumstances were slightly different.
See, and that's what I mean. So what I found interesting is, like, it's basically the same with like Danny. Like, when he was weird and was talking with his finger, like, his mother just like was just like, oh, he's just his imaginary friend, don't really need to worry about it. But with Abra, her parents saw her put spoons all over the ceiling and they were just like kind of okay with it. They didn't flip out. They didn't say don't use your powers. They didn't like berate her for using them or saying you're a freak for using them. They were just like, this is something our child does. We have to accept it and manage it as it comes. Like, even when she had her nightmare, like, her mother was just like talking to her about it, making sure she was okay. And like, she was like, yeah, I'm okay. And then that was it. You know what I mean? Like, most parents in that situation, like, fuck, if I was in that situation with my daughter, like, I'd be freaking out. I was like, what are we going to do next? How are we going to handle this? Like, I don't know what's the extent of this power and how she's going to use it. Do we teach her how to use it? Do we shame her into not using it so she's safe from prying eyes? Like, that kind of stuff. But she just seemed like everything was perfect for her.
Let me ask you guys a question. Who do you think Abra is?
What do you mean?
I mean, in the context of the universe of The Shining and Doctor Sleep, who do you think she is? Like, she's this. In other words, like, where does this immensely powerful girl come from? Total happenstance? Think she's like the descendant of some great spellcaster like Merlin? Like, who do you think that she is?
I don't know if I have any canon, like any personal canon or reason to believe she was anyone special.
The only thing that I could have gleaned from the information given from the movie was she might be a descendant of Dick in some way. But that's the only thing I could think of. Like, other than that, like, I don't know, because they don't expand upon where these powers come from, if they're hereditary, how they manifest, and the level of power, other than like comparing them to the antagonist group, the Knot, and then Abra. So,
what if I told you that she's Danny's niece?
come again?
She is the grandchild of a daughter that Jack Torrance had with another woman.
One more time?
Yeah.
Really?
Wait, how did was this in the book?
Correct.
Is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
They
it is hereditary, right?
Well, yeah, they tell us that in the first Shining movie, though.
That it's hereditary?
Yeah, Dick
That
tells
wasn't-
Danny that's hereditary.
That wasn't in the
He's
movie,
talking
right?
about how he gets it. Yeah, it is.
I
That
mean, he's
first
talking about how him and his grandmother have the Shining, but I didn't know if we were supposed to imply that was hereditary or it skips generations.
Not the hereditary part. In the movie, did they say that it was his niece?
No, never.
No,
okay.
But there is a fun throwaway line in the movie where they're sitting on that park bench and he's like musing about how people will think it's weird he's talking to a little girl, and she's like, "Oh, you'll just say you're my uncle."
Oh, okay, yeah. That is a throwaway line, because I definitely didn't pick up anything from that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it turns
that's
out
why
that
she calls him Uncle Dan. Oh shit, 2 and 2.
Yeah. Turns out he actually is her uncle, but who knew?
Yeah.
So yeah, fun fact about it.
That is actually a really fun fact, and it also makes things come full circle, just like Dick said. I still really love how they made Dick his conscience. Like, that was a really good stroke. Like,
I think Dick was
from the book.
I think Dick was actually a real ghost, not his conscience.
No, he was a real ghost, but he acted as his conscience.
He was like a spiritual guy. Like, that's how I saw him.
Yeah. Because, like, dude, Danny was going through some shit. Like, basically, like, going from place to place, didn't know what he was doing after his mother died, haunted by his past, and probably the most, like, harrowing scene is after he leaves the drunk girl who I guess threw up in her sleep and probably was dead or whatever. Like, it shows her grabbing his arm, and she's like, "They haven't found us yet." And she's like, they were so used to him crying, like, nobody's checked in on us. And then the baby turns over and it's, "Mama." I was like, "Oh, fuck you, no."
Bro, the atrocities committed against children in this movie were really uncomfortable for me.
It was super uncomfortable. Like, Kim accidentally watched the scene where they were feasting on the baseball boy. She was like, "I don't like this movie. I don't like it at all." She literally turned it off. It was like, "No, I can't do it." I was like, yeah. And, like, I liked how they showed such visceral content. So you ended up being like, even though they're charismatic characters, or like you see them just like, on the beach just chilling, you do not fall in love with them because they're just straight up scum.
Yeah. The one thing that I really did like about this movie was that one scene where she tries to like telepathically send the the murder of that boy to Danny, and he looks up in the mirror and sees red rum. I was like, that's clever.
Mhm.
That's good.
Yeah, it was
That's a nice
super
throwback.
clever. Yeah, it was really good.
And then they proceeded with the rest of the movie, and well,
Really? And I was like, oh, that was the only thing good about it. Everything else was just dog shit.
it's not the only thing good about it, but like the more I muse on the movie, it's just like they took it too far.
How
Like
so?
it's not a horror movie. It's
Oh, no.
not
It's a thriller.
It's barely.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
even calling it a thriller is kind of giving it a little too much credit. Like there's nothing really suspenseful or thrilling about the movie. It's just kind of like a horrific action flick.
I agree. I do agree.
Kind of like what's that movie with Drew Barrymore? Firestarter?
Never saw it. But
Okay.
it's first of all, I really don't like how they took The Shining and just turned it into straight superpowers. I just can't get past that part. I think that there's a universe, a world where you could make that choice and do it in a way that works for me, but this wasn't it. And there are other like little throwaway things that I don't like when Halloran's like, well, nobody shines like you. And then 5 minutes later, oh, here's this girl with a really stupid name who's way more powerful than you. Also, there's this evil woman over here who's also more powerful than you. So really, you're not that special at all.
I mean, he's showing that even without cultivating his powers and basically holding them back and not using them, like, you know how if you don't use a muscle, like it's going to be really weak. He was still powerful enough to call out to Dick from miles and miles away to like basically say, "We need help." You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing.
When Dick said that, I don't even think Abra was born yet, was she? Because she told Doc that when he was a little kid. Yeah, he told him when he was little. But him not knowing about the hunt, the knot, though. I mean, I believe him not knowing about the knot, but would you call
Doesn't
her?
he talk to him about the knot later though?
He talks to him about the knot as a ghost because he's saying like I think as a ghost he has more privy to what's going on. But that's the thing. That's the thing. Like he literally said like, well, he didn't say. Doc said these people have money and power because when you live that long, you can buy stocks and bonds and basically create an unlimited wealth and fortune that makes you nigh untouchable by regular societal standards, like, you know, the police or the FBI or that kind of shit, because you've created so many connections and got so much money just stockpiled up that no one can touch you. So that I feel that point was made really well to be like, oh, we could just call the FBI, the police, like we found out where the boy was buried and they can like track him down. I was like, no, they have money and power and connections, like that's not gonna work.
Well,
we need to take
more importantly, it's gonna be real fucking weird if you're like, hey, I know I don't work at this place in any way. I don't have any real reason to be there, but I found a dead boy at this place.
Yeah.
Like immediately the police will be like, what the fuck? Why were you even there?
Yeah, dude.
And you can't exactly be like, well, there's this thing called The Shining.
I mean, he could do the trick that he did with the guy at the AA meeting where he told him where he left his watch. And then he's all like, oh, it was just intuition in my gut. And he's like, bullshit. Intuition in your gut that I was washing my hands? No.
So I just read this. The actual book plot synopsis of Doctor Sleep is very different from the movie.
How different are we talking about?
So the True Knot actually are dying off because of an infectious disease, not because they're running out of steam. So
steam.
they send a initial group of people to kidnap her, and then Billy and Dan and her father kill off a couple of the first team of kidnappers, and then the whole, like, the Abra's great grandmother who's dying of cancer and telepathically learns from the dying woman that he and Abra's mother Lucy share the same father. Like that whole part is brought up and explained in the movie and plays a huge part. Dan retrieves her diseased steam, and then essentially through a series of events ends up feeding that diseased steam to the rest of the Knot members, and they die of that.
So, all right, Dean, compare like what happened in the movie and compared to that explanation, which would you prefer?
Well, that wasn't a good explanation, so I mean,
no, I understand that, but like you gave us a general synopsis, but again, like even with the details, like
actually,
obtuse.
And when they're at the Overlook Hotel, I guess they get help from Jack. Jack actually helps them in the Overlook Hotel. Oh, and also a big difference. I also read a little bit of the synopsis of The Shining. At the end of the Shining novel, the Jack actually screws with the boiler room, and it ends up exploding and burning down at the end of the novel of the Shining novel. So it wasn't even like it wasn't even a thing in Doctor Sleep, and I think they went to its remains there. But I mean, this isn't a super thorough plot synopsis, so I don't exactly know why they did. But
well, to answer your question, would I prefer this superhero bullshit that we got, or a novel where these psychic vampires are killed off by the measles? I think I'll take the measles.
I mean, yeah, because it says
the measles.
So, all right, Abra.
I mean, it does make more sense. Yeah.
So right here, this paragraph, Abra baits Rose the Hat into confronting her at the location where the Overlook Hotel once stood. Dan and Billy show up in her place, so Billy's still alive at this point. Dan and Billy show up in her place while Abra helps them using her astral projections, like tricks them into thinking that she's there. Dan releases the steam he collected from Abra's dying great-grandmother to the group of true Knot lying in wait. Already weak from the disease, the group inadvertently inhale the steam and die. Dan and Abra fight Rose the Hat in a long psychic struggle, and with help from Billy and the ghost of Dan's father, Jack, they manage to push Rose the Hat down from the Overlook to her death off a mountain, I would assume. Now, there's probably a significant amount of subtext that go on, maybe like 50 to 100 pages of such, but that's at a very high level what happens at the Overlook Hotel instead of what we get in the movie. Very different. Very, very, very different.
Also, Dan survives the book.
Yes. It doesn't say anywhere that he dies. Apparently he does survive, yeah.
Yeah, I need to reread The Shining and then read Doctor Sleep.
I've never read the novels, actually. Personally, I know I've never read them.
Interestingly, The Shining, the novel, is the book that broke me on Stephen King. I was just like, I can't fucking do this. Are you kidding me with this bullshit that you're coming up with? But I really kind of don't like this movie. And the more that like we talk about it, the less I like it. To the point where them dying to the measles seems like a much better alternative.
Much better alternative. I mean, and more fitting demise.
I thought it was
not only that, I thought it was like,
yeah.
Not only that, but like, I have to imagine that Stephen King isn't going to turn them into fucking Batman and the Joker, and even if he did, it would make more sense with more time to explain this nonsense that they're pulling off.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how the Star Wars sequels just started like ratcheting the Force up to 4,000 just because they can.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's kind of how I feel about this movie too.
But no, like, so the where I find what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, where I don't agree with how you're like basically saying that they made them into like superheroes and superpowers is like their psychic abilities, like most of which don't actually manipulate the physical realm. They're just like, the pusher is just super suggestion. Like, I can believe that. There's people who are super suggestive or might manipulate your way of thinking to do something. But it's just, again, taking it to like a degree that's still believable in that world. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to tell everybody in my vicinity to do this and they'll listen. No, it's just like she just suggests it to one person with her will. And then, like, honestly, the others in the knot, like, I don't see what their powers are. I mean, Crow Daddy, your favorite person, he,
Daddy.
he can track people based on like their psychic signature, like basically a psychic bloodhound. That's fine. That's nothing really to worry about. And then Rose, she just seems like is all powerful in the mental mindscape per se. So that's how I see her. And then like Danny is just thought projection. So I don't see where you guys are getting the fact like, oh, this is like anime power up shit.
Honestly,
you know what I mean?
It's all from Abra. It's pretty much entirely from Abra.
I mean, I get it.
Because
from Abra, yeah, but again, all that's in the mental mindscape. It's not.
I know, but
other than her controlling the spoons.
I know, but it is her just unwavering confidence and unyielding like personality. So like her father dies and her mother freaks out and is trying to call her, and she just answers the phone, "I love you," and throws the phone out. Like, she is just such an unyieldingly confident and driven character for her age. And it like, the mental maturity doesn't mirror what someone her age would be going through, right? Like, that's something like, that's the wisdom. And I get it, she has the shining, so maybe she's just so much more advanced than everybody else. And
I don't think,
but it just feels like
advanced.
It's just, well, I think it's clear that like her wisdom and her mental maturity is that of a, like, it even surpasses Danny, right? Like, she's more fit to handle these struggles and the challenges than even Danny is as a 40-year-old, and she's like 13 or 14 years old. And we're just led to believe that she has this, this persona, she has this ethos around her because she is just all powerful. And it just feels like, to me, it's just very anime. It's it's just very anime. It's very OP, and they don't humanize her enough in critical moments, I think, to make it really believable. Like, even when she was drugged and being driven by Crow Daddy, she didn't freak out. She was just totally fine. She was super calm, like, she just, like, that level of wisdom and that level of restraint and, once again, mental maturity is just really unbecoming of someone her age. And the only explanation is she's just so omnipotent. She's just so powerful that's just who she is, because she is so much more powerful than everybody else. The second most powerful character, she toys with her constantly. She toyed with her when they first met, and she invaded her mind after setting a trap. She toyed with her again when they were in the supermarket scene, and she like pushed her away. Right. And then she toyed with her again after the truck crashed with Crow Daddy, killing him. She leaned over his body, just unremorsefully, just kind of like watching him die, and then seeing Rose astro project and threatening her in the road, and then just walking through her. Like, Abra is a brick wall of a personality. Like, nothing phases her, and it just feels, it's very unbecoming of her age, and she just feels so overwhelmingly powerful. It's very, like, it just makes everything kind of feel awkward.
Yeah.
Well, for me, not awkward. Awkward's a bad way to put it, but it just doesn't put things in the correct perspective. It doesn't ever feel like it's a struggle. Like they were ever really at odds in any moment.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but like, I saw it as that's a product of her upbringing. Like, she had a great childhood understanding, and on top of that, like, she wasn't shunned for having her powers or showing that she could do this. On top of, like, she could basically read everyone's mind around them, so she's probably been in tune with a lot of things that she should have known about at her age. So she had to mature quickly to deal with everything that was happening at such a young age.
Yeah, they had the scene in the school where she was reading the minds of her classmates. Yeah.
Everybody. Yeah. So like you think she does that with her teachers, her parents, everybody she comes in contact with? Like, yeah. And then like I think her not being affected by Crow Daddy dying, but she was super affected by when the little boy was being mutilated and fed upon. Is after that's where she sees the boy is getting fed upon, she doesn't even see them the not as human beings. She sees them as straight up monsters. She only refers to them as monsters. Even when there was a line where they were talking about them, and it's like she was basically like they're human or seem to be human. Like she basically doesn't see them as human beings. She sees them as creatures, and she sees them as evil creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why she was like, I hope it hurts.
Yeah.
You know, if you see someone horribly like mutilating a child for their own benefit, and then you see them dying on the side of the road, you'd have the same reaction. Like you wouldn't have any remorse for them whatsoever, even if they are a human being. But seeing them do something so horrific and visceral that you could basically feel it, you would dissociate them from any sort of caring that you could give them. You'd basically see them as scum, and you can feel anything for them other than anger and hatred. So I get why she was like that when Crow Daddy was dying. Like I get it. I don't think it was a byproduct of her all powerful omnipotence. I think it was a byproduct of her upbringing and the fact that when every time she did go against Rose, she came out on top. So like she honestly she'd never been knocked down in her life that I could see or had a disadvantage, and that's why she was so overly confident. Because you see that with wealthy people in movies to where they have everything handed to them, no sort of troubles or obstacles that their money or their connections from their family couldn't solve. So yes, they would have that arrogance.
So, couple of things. First of all, while your explanation makes sense generally, for a kid that young, it's a stretch to say that she would deal with it that way. We're talking about like she's young enough to have experienced that. That's the kind of shit that even for an adult would cause PTSD.
Yeah.
For a child that age to take that information in and then just internalize it and be like, well, they're monsters and just start treating them that way. Logically, it makes sense, but I don't know that I buy that a kid would actually do that, regardless of whether or not they have superpowers. And circling back to an earlier point, I don't know that it's just Abra that I feel like has ridiculous fucking superpowers. Like for example, you were talking about the death of that guy.
Cool, Daddy.
CD.
You just don't even want to say his name?
How did that happen? Well, Danny discovered that he can just long distance possess Abra and then long distance, I don't know, use the force to veer the van into an oncoming tree. Like, that's fucking insanely ridiculous given the world that we've been experiencing up to that point.
Yeah.
Or Andy, who, like, just uses force persuasion to make Billy just shoot himself in the head.
That one,
like,
yeah, that was a hell of a lot more than what she had already been shown to do. Just put people to sleep or mildly influence them. You're right.
Right. And while that's a logical kind of escalation of the powers that she seems to have, it's still like ratcheting everything up to another level. Like everything in this movie, I don't know. Like it all kind of makes sense from a psychic perspective, but it's to such a different level of power that it's it feels like they're just super villains
and
and shit now.
that's why I don't enjoy this movie, because it's a psychological thriller. I enjoy this movie because it's essentially an action movie. Like as an action movie that isn't trying to do what The Shining did, it's a fun movie. Like the scene where Danny takes over Abra and they have the dialogue with Crow Daddy, and Crow Daddy is self-aware of what's going on. Like that whole scene is actually super cool. I thought that was pretty neat. Them ambushing and taking them out in front of the RV, and Abra astral projecting and tricking them into thinking that the stuffed animal was her, and then they just are there shooting at them with snipers and shit from the woods. Like that was a cool scene. Like they're cool scenes. The movie is still fun, but you really have to go into it not expecting The Shining 2, because it is such a significantly different movie down to an emotional level. Like there's no beautiful cinematic shots. There's no creative or captivating scenes or images in this movie like there is in The Shining. Like that's all The Shining has, Stanley Kubrick's vision and direction. This movie is just fun. It's just a fun movie that's a little spooky sometimes, nowhere near as spooky as The Shining. It's got a pretty good story. It's fun to watch, and that's just pretty much it. Like it's cool to see them reincorporate the Overlook Hotel and reincorporate the ghosts, but this is one of the only movies that I remember seeing where, like, even in the very beginning when Danny was young, and after Dick told him about the box and he was sitting there watching TV with his mom, then he just gets up and goes into the bathroom and sees the old woman, and he's like, all right, let's do this. Closes the door, traps her away. Like you don't really see that, like that direct disrespect and confrontation, willing confrontation with a ghost like that. So, so it was just, it's already like it already sets you up for a different tone of the movie. And how the fuck, one thing I don't understand is how the hell did the ghosts from the Overlook Hotel find Danny? And if that's the case, are we to assume that ghosts that are half a freaking country away can find him, that any ghost around him is going to just be completely enamored with him? Or is it because he had a personal interaction with them already and they know about him?
I think it's because they had a personal interaction with him and they know about him, so they basically got his scent, per se.
So
A taste for
so we're
him.
saying there is no one from Colorado to Florida. I think he was living in Florida then at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, Florida.
So.
There's no one in between there that's shown at all. No Shining in between there that they could have picked up on or scented or hinted at. They just beelined it straight for him. Maybe because he just shone brighter than others, so it was easier to find him.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I think that's it. And especially because if you think about it, the Knot were even saying like there's less children with steam, and like the steam isn't as potent, like twofold while they're starving. So by going from Colorado to Florida, if you have slim pickings, it's not going to matter. Like you're basically going to go for the brightest star that you can see. You're not really going to run into that many children or people with the Shining ability, because either the Knot killed them off or they basically haven't been born.
So
I don't know, man. We run into a little girl that's got the Shining. We got Danny. We got a cat. Seems like they're pretty fucking abundant.
Yeah, I guess the
cat. No. The cat does not have the Shining. It is an actual thing in old people homes, and I know the whole why that happens. I know specifically why that happens. I've actually read a story about it.
Bro,
so the cat is just a happenstance.
Bro, you know that they put that cat in there on purpose. You know damn well that that's the implication.
I understand it's the implication, but I toss it as an aside because I know exactly why cats do that in group in old people homes.
Okay,
I know exactly why.
But even if we disregard the cat who totally has The Shining, we still meet like 3, 4, 5 people in this movie that have it. Like it, and we're talking about like in this small area of just the US that we see.
Yeah,
like,
we're not
it
talking
can't
about
be
all over the world.
right.
Yeah.
It can't be that rare.
The assumption is that they just already interacted with him, so maybe they found him easier. I don't know. There's a lot of assumptions in that, but this movie did not make me feel uncomfortable. Well, sorry, it made me feel uncomfortable, but in different ways than The Shining did. So The Shining made me feel uncomfortable.
The kid torturing.
Yeah, that was really uncomfortable. And also, that's actually kind of that parallels an existing conspiracy theory as well.
Like about a cabal.
Well, about adrenochrome, the whole thing about like the conspiracy theory that there's the super elites in the world are harvesting a hormone that's created mostly by children when they're in times of
children's adrenal glands.
Yeah, like when they're in times of distress, and that's how they extract it. So like,
stay so young.
Like it's the stupidest fucking thing in the world. But like that also kind of parallels it a little bit. I noticed that immediately, and I just kind of was like, oh, that's kind of what that also is too. But The Shining had spooks in it. It made me feel creepy. It made me feel vulnerable. This one at the only times where it gave me a emotional reaction was just when I felt just uneasy or unnerved or uncomfortable with what I was seeing. And it was very few moments in the movie. So the movie is just a fun story. It's just an entertaining movie. You know, I still think The Shining, like if I had to choose to watch one of them, I'd pick The Shining 100% of the time, every single time. I wouldn't go out of my way to watch Doctor Sleep again unless I wanted to show it to somebody else. Like I'll probably show my mom Doctor Sleep because she loves The Shining. She saw it in theaters, and she would probably get a kick out of this too, to just have some additional context of the universe of it, you know? And she would probably have the same reaction that I do. It's just cool. That was an entertaining movie. Cool. You know, I'm glad I watched it.
So, John.
Yeah.
How many spook out of spook are you giving The Shining?
Good Lord. Oh my God. So first of all, if we're gonna use spook as a rating meter, we need to set ground rules. Like how many spook out of spook?
I mean, that's up to you. We decided that last week.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Jesus Christ. All right, you know what? I will give The Shining 3 out of 5 spook. You happy now?
Oh, okay. All right. Jordan, how many spook are you giving The Shining?
I think it earned a solid 56 out of 37.
I like that.
Like, God damn
definitely
it.
had a lot of spook.
I hate you guys so much.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. I don't know how you're struggling with it, John, but you know, so it really worked for me. I love The Shining. It's always a great movie to put yourself in that type of spooky atmosphere, you know, because that's all the movie is really extremely atmospheric, and it nails it 100%.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Hold on, I need to know something before I give this my official spook rating.
Will knowing this affect your spook rating?
So once again, like I didn't mention this, I love your mechanical keyboard. Like hearing you just type away, like let me search on like.
Yeah, I'm jealous. Mine's not that loud. Like I have a Corsair one.
I'm on a MacBook, so but I have a mechanical keyboard inside. Like I'm literally just gonna take the keyboard off of my computer and just bring it outside so you can hear me type. Not even plugged into anything, just typing and shit.
So, given the sheer amount of spook in The Shining,
God damn it.
I think it's only appropriate to give it a perfect spook out of spook.
Ooh, that felt good to hear.
I hate you guys so much.
So, Jordan, how many spook are you giving Dr. Sleep?
Dr. Sleep, I think Dr. Sleep earns its 23 out of 8.
Okay. Okay.
Definitely not
Jesus
a lot of
fucking Christ.
not a lot of spook in Doctor Sleep. Just a entertaining story, and it's pretty. It's a pretty satisfying watch after watching The Shining to see Danny again, and Ewan McGregor did such a fantastic job with the character. I loved it. Yeah, it was great.
John, how many spook are you giving Dr. Sleep?
I'm giving fucking Doctor Sleep 95 out of 3 spook.
Yo!
Whoa!
Wow.
Whoa! That's a lot
I
of
mean,
spook.
Just for my viewing experience alone, I think I will say this: without The Shining, it wouldn't have been as good. I will say that 100%. But again, I've stated this before. Like my viewing experience and like the way that I was enveloped in watching Doctor Sleep was total night and day, contrary to when watching The Shining. Because The Shining is more of a psychological suspense thriller, and Doctor Sleep is more of a visceral action ride, which I prefer. And then also the lore behind it, which is expounded upon, like there are more people with powers, and there are different types of powers instead of just like there's this one guy who happenstance has the same thought projection power that I have and knows how to use it, and that's it. So that's just how I felt about it, and it was just a really good watch because this is like movies like Firestarter, Push, other movies, but better because of the mythos that it's built around.
Awesome.
I would have to say that for me, this movie gets it's a spook out of spook.
You are a son of a bitch.
It's your
But it's fine.
lowest spook rating yet.
By far and away the lowest spook rating yet. I would take either of our past 2 spook movies over this one. In fact, they could erase this movie out of existence and I would feel like nothing of value was lost.
Oh, that's hurtful.
I feel like it provided some value, but
Jesus Christ.
Did it provide value to enhance the original? No.
Definitely not.
Did in itself still provide enough entertainment for me to be thoroughly enjoyed with watching it? Absolutely. That was not a waste of time. I really enjoyed it.
You know, I actually got myself a nice bottle of wine last night. I might consider rewatching it if I got about 9/10 of the way through that bottle by myself.
Jesus Christ, Dean.
I'm just saying that if we could get a director's cut of this movie where the measles make a comeback, that might be a better movie.
I don't think
I'm gonna look and see if you can download the director's cut, and I'll send you the link. How about that?
There's a director's cut?
I'm not sure. I'm gonna say I'm gonna look.
and I'm gonna say I'm pretty confident you're not gonna get that unless you read the book.
So, which I actually think I will do. I think I'm gonna get the audiobook for The Shining and Doctor Sleep and just go through both of them and see how I feel. So
something else I noticed,
if and when I complete that, I will give you an update on that.
Something else I noticed, is just a quick throwaway thing. They changed the room number from the book to the movie in The Shining.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
So,
and according to Kubrick, that's because the hotel that it was filmed at didn't want anybody who visited to think that their room was haunted, so they asked them to change it. Only problem is if you call up that hotel, that room doesn't actually exist. So
239, right?
Yeah,
I was gonna say 231, but maybe it is 239. I'm not sure.
What's the freaking? Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot the room number already. I'm going crazy here. Where are my notes? 237.
That's what it is
in the movie. Yeah. So so there is no. So in the book, it's 217.
Is 217? Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
So we're saying that 237 doesn't exist at the real hotel.
Neither does 217. Neither of those 2 rooms exist.
Oh.
Okay.
That's the point. Like his story is that they didn't want people who stay there to think 217 has this weird bloated woman in the bathtub, And so he changed it at the hotel's request, but that room doesn't even exist. So that's not even possible that they would make such a request.
Fucking cute.
Pretty much.
Huh.
And on that note, before we go, if you enjoyed this and you're on YouTube, be sure to drop us a like and subscribe as we drop a new episode every single week. If you're enjoying us on your favorite podcast service, please drop us a review. It really helps us out and helps us to find a new audience. Don't forget to come and chat with us on the Discord or in our live streams as we record the show every week. And as always, have fun out there, guys.